The story begins inside the game, Warlord in the Woldberry Forest. A warrior appears extremely injured because he and his entire army were completely wiped out by the troops of the woman sitting on the throne. Even so, one of her subordinates comments that the person who truly matters has not appeared yet. The woman then orders them to kill the survivor at once. When the executioner moves forward with his axe to finish the warrior, someone suddenly appears and stops the blow, throwing the executioner away. That person is Harkon, whose real name is Jaeun An. He appears to help the defeated army, but in truth he is the real target on the other side. As soon as they notice his presence, several enemies charge at him together, trusting in their numerical advantage. Even so, Harkon defeats them all with ease, showing that numbers mean nothing when the difference in skill is that great. Harkon is part of the Haho Mass Guild and carries the title of Hero Killer. The army he saved apologizes, taking the blame for not noticing the ambush in the forest. He says there is no reason to apologize and extends his hand to help them up, stating that it was not their fault, but the fault of enemies who cannot win a fair fight. The woman sitting on the throne is Sile, whose real name is Che Seolian. She belongs to the Thunder Hunters Guild and holds the title of Thunder Queen. She mocks the loyalty between Hyrule and the others, saying that anyone who joins trash becomes just another garbage bag in the pile. Hyrule responds by reminding her that it is this same trash that always defeats her. The provocation irritates Sile, who orders her men to attack. Hyrule activates his inventory slot and equips his true weapon and armor, making it clear that regret is for the weak. He faces them all again, but this time he is shocked when he is stabbed in the back by his own companions. The system informs him that he is in critical condition. The group commander apologizes, saying that everyone needs to survive and that there is no resentment involved, only money. Sile begins to laugh and explains that friendship means nothing when millions are on the table. She reveals that she will remove him from the game forever by killing him every time he logs in, preventing him from playing. Since Heilbegin makes a living from this game, without it his life collapses. Even as he tries to react, he is attacked again by his own allies and can barely move. Meanwhile, Sile thanks everyone for their good work. Confused and betrayed, Hirkin questions the reason for this, since he considered that guilt his family. One of the men coldly answers that they are being paid millions to kill him, and that no one would refuse such an offer. After everything he did for them, that is his end. The system announces his death, and imposes a 48-hour restriction before he can log in again. He awakens in his house inside the virtual reality capsule. It is explained that Warlord is an extremely advanced virtual reality game with artificial intelligence and massive investments that dominated the market. For Harkon, the game was not just entertainment, it was his career, his reputation, and the place where he found what he believed to be his family. Now he feels that he has lost everything. Consumed by anger, he leaves his house determined to confront those who betrayed him. He thinks about everything he fought for to reach that point, and how he was discarded for money. In the middle of this rage, he ends up being hit by a garbage truck. Lying on the ground, he wonders if he is really going to die like that, without taking revenge on those who betrayed him. Sometime later, he is connected to the game again. The player Harkon returns to Warlord. However, this time he does not return as he was before. His first challenge is to complete the initial tutorial. He needed to survive the Minotaur and escape the labyrinth. When he regains consciousness inside the game, Harkon begins to wonder if he is truly inside Warlord and why he has returned to the tutorial. Other players around him call him a noob and tell him to get up before he dies. The Minotaur in front of them is furious, and everyone comments that the monster is impossible to defeat alone. They say they need at least 3 people on the front line to have any chance. They ask why Harkon does not take the main position, but he remains confused, questioning why he is in that tutorial, and why the Minotaur is still there, since that creature had been removed 5 years earlier for being too difficult. One of the players finds that strange and replies that the game was only released 10 months ago. Hearing this, Harkon becomes even more confused, and the others begin to think that something is wrong with him. They decide to ignore him and focus on the fight. Suddenly, Harkon charges alone at the Minotaur with his sword. The others say he has gone crazy and that he will only get himself killed like that. However, with extreme skill, he dodges the monster's first attack and begins cutting into its body repeatedly, exploiting weak points with absurd precision. At the right moment, he delivers a decisive strike, and the Minotaur falls dead. The players are left in shock, asking who that guy is who killed the monster so easily. Noticing his talent, they try to approach him and invite him to join a guild, praising his ability. At that moment, Hirkin remembers the betrayal he suffered in the past when he trusted other people. He stands up, finally understanding that he cannot repeat the same mistake. Without hesitation, he kills the 2 players right there, slicing their throats. For him, trusting someone again would mean deserving to be betrayed again. Thus, Hirkin the hero killer was back. When Jaehun logs out of the game, he realizes he is inside a capsule that is not in his house but in a V-Gear store, the company responsible for the virtual reality equipment. He remembers that 5 years earlier, he did not have the money to own his own V-Gear and only played the demo version at the store. This confirms that he has truly gone back in time. Without wasting time, time, he decides to use all the knowledge he has of the future. He approaches the saleswoman with his card and asks for a V-gear immediately. The payment begins to process, but soon a message appears saying insufficient balance. Jae-hyun then remembers that at that time, he still had no money, since he was not even playing professionally yet. While thinking about what to do, he hears a commercial drawing attention to the game, saying that the strong never hesitate before challenges. The advertisement is starred by Syl, the Thunder Queen. When he sees her face on the big screen, he falls silent, remembering the cruel words he heard before dying in the game. With few options, he returns home at the end of the day and somehow manages to install his own V-gear. The technician confirms that the equipment is ready for use. The only way he found to get the money was to take a 10 million loan from dangerous loan sharks, men who had already driven a knife between his fingers as a warning of what would happen if he failed to pay. Even nervous, he accepts the risk since he believes he had no other choice. For Jae-hyun, nothing matters anymore except revenge. Even if he has to crawl through hell, he will destroy those who betrayed him. As he connects to the game again, he thinks of only one thing becoming strong. To put an end to all of them, Jae-hyun finally logs back into the game as the user Herverkin. He is welcome to the world of Warlord, and thinks that it has been a long time since he was last there. He remembers that after the tutorial that Divine Guide should appear, but he even forgets her name for a moment. Soon a woman with the appearance of a goddess surrounded by golden light appears before him. She congratulates him for completing the tutorial and introduces herself as Ariadne, the guide responsible for helping him select his class. Ariadne explains that he must choose his base class and reveals 3 options. She makes it clear that the abilities developed at this stage will determine his advanced class in the future. The first option is warrior, focused on the front line, close combat, and heavy weapon use. Harkon remembers that he was a warrior in his past life. It was efficient for leveling up early on, but later it became extremely difficult to play alone with that class. The second option is priest, a support class focused on strengthening allies. He immediately discards this possibility, determined never again to live helping others, only to be betrayed later. With only the last option remaining, Ariadne says that his path may be darker. The divine light enters his body, and the system confirms the selection of the base class. He is teleported to the class tower. Inside the tower, he sees a great staircase leading to the top, where a strange-looking mage stands. The man introduces himself as Golko, the guide on the path of magic, and asks what kind of magic he wishes to learn. Without hesitation, Herkin answers that he wants black magic. Golko tries to soften it, asking if he meant magic of the wilds, but Herkin reaffirms that he wants black magic. The mage explains that this magic is extremely powerful, but devours the soul of the target and consumes the user as well. Herkin states that he is fully aware of that and that he came prepared. He believes black magic is perfect for what he needs to do. Trembling Golko reveals his true form by tearing off his own face, showing a skull underneath. He too is a black mage, and says it has been a long time since someone so young chose this path. If Herkin is truly prepared, he must touch the book. Even after being warned that this path will destroy his soul and heart, Herkin tells him to begin at once, saying that his heart is already broken anyway. Golko lets out a dark laugh and acknowledges that he is an interesting person. The energy of black magic invades Herkin's body and soul. At that moment, he remembers a legendary video from his past life, in which a Necromancer player completed an extremely difficult raid alone, thanks to the army he controlled. He understands that this is exactly the kind of power he needs. The system then confirms that he has become a Necromancer. For now, he is only a novice Necromancer, and has acquired the skill Bone Fragment. When he activates the skill, a small skull-shaped amulet appears. When he throws it to the ground, it bounces like a marble. As soon as it touches the floor, the system announces that a skeletal warrior infused with magic is about to be born. Slowly, the skeleton rises. Herkin decides that this time he will give everything he has as a Necromancer. His first skeletal warrior finally stands up. He comments that it is already time to begin, and that there must be a dungeon nearby. However, when he looks back, he notices that the skeleton's head has fallen to the ground. The two remain silent for a moment, and Herkin does not understand what just happened. Soon after, he passes through a portal and enters the initial training dungeon. He remembers that in his past life, his skeletons were not this clumsy, and cannot understand why they now seem so unstable. When he checks the skill, the system informs him that Bone Fragment has proficiency F, allowing him to summon only one warrior unit. The description explains that using the skill basically consists of infusing mana into bones to create undead. Herkin thinks that the skeleton's problem might be the low proficiency of the skill. If that is the case, then he just needs to level it up. At that moment, he hears a roar echoing through the dungeon, and realizes that this is the perfect opportunity to test it. A training monster appears before him, a charcoal wolf. Herkin remembers that these wolves are not very strong, but they are fast, making them ideal for testing combat performance. He uses Bone Fragment again and throws the amulet to the ground. The skeleton forms, and this time manages to stand. Upon detecting the enemies, it takes a combat stance, and even intimidates the wolves, who hesitate for a moment. Herkin orders the attack. The skeleton charges forward without fear, since it feels neither pain nor hesitation. At first, it even seems better than expected, moving with a certain agility. Herkin begins to think that perhaps reaching the maximum level will not be so difficult after all. But the moment the skeleton makes direct contact with the wolves, it is simply shattered. It turns into a pile of bones scattered across the floor. The skull rolls to Herkin's feet, as if defeated and humiliated. He cannot believe what he is seeing and thinks it is impossible impossible for the skill to be this weak. When he reviews the detailed description, he discovers that summoned skeletons use a self-learning system to evolve their combat abilities, but the user must define an operation mode. There are defense, attack, and special action modes. Hircon realizes that he completely forgot to configure this. He activates defense mode while the wolves are still nudging the skeleton's remains. As soon as the undead recomposes itself, it enters a defensive stance, blocking and retreating. Even so, the situation remains ridiculous. Curious Hircon tests special action mode. Suddenly, the skeleton begins to dance enthusiastically. To make matters worse, the wolves seem to react to it as if it were a provocation and start moving in the same strange way. Hircon feels that he is completely doomed. He remembers that Golko warned him that this path would be complicated. He starts to think that everything is a nightmare. To make things worse, he tries to check the option to delete the character, but discovers that newly created accounts cannot be deleted within the first 3 months. He cannot change class, cannot delete the account, and still needs to pay the loan shark and the rent. For a moment, he even thinks that maybe another truck would solve his situation. Feeling that every time he is about to move forward, he ends up back at zero. He looks at the skeleton beside him, which is now throwing punches into the air, as if it had accomplished something great. Hircon tells it to stand still, because it is only making everything worse. Then he remembers the legendary Necromancer from his past life, and the most important detail of the skill the skeletons learn by observing and evolve according to their training. He himself is experienced in combat. The skeleton was watching while he fought the wolves. He can teach it. Realizing this, Hircon grabs a staff and places it in the skeleton's hand. He states that the undead is lucky to have a master like him, someone who was once called a genius in the game and trained an entire guild. The first lesson is simple: if you do not dodge, you die. Without warning, he rushes forward and begins attacking his own skeleton, knocking it down repeatedly. They repeat the training several times. The skeleton keeps getting hit, but little by little, it starts reacting better. There comes a point when the blows no longer land so easily. Hircon reinforces that when being attacked, it must not stand still. First dodge, then counterattack. Any opening must be exploited. The skeleton begins to show a firmer stance, as if it truly understands. Then it charges once more at the charcoal wolves. This time it easily dodges the first attack and counters straight to one of their necks. Right after that, it strikes the other in the stomach with precision. Alone, it defeats both monsters. After the fight, the skeleton looks at Hircon as if waiting for approval. Hircon asks why it is staring, and reminds it that distraction in combat is dangerous. Even so, he admits that its movements were not that bad. At that moment, the proficiency of the bone fragment skill rises 3 levels at once, and Hircon also levels up. He admits that his skeleton did an excellent job. Later in Figus Castle, the initial village for players, the streets are crowded. There are people recruiting for guilds, others forming groups for boss raids, and movement everywhere. Hircon observes that his little skeleton really learns fast, and thinks that soon he might be able to clear dungeons alone. But before that, he needs to focus on the essential: reaching level 10. While walking through the city, he lightly bumps into someone, and is pulled aggressively. A fat player starts complaining that he has no manners, and should apologize for bumping into someone. Hircon looks at him and thinks they look like low-level villains. He simply ignores them because he has no time for that. The fat man insists, asks if he is deaf, and throws a punch at him. Before the blow lands, another player intercepts it. It is a large, muscular man, wearing sunglasses and flashy Hawaiian clothes. He says that you do not go around punching people in the middle of the street. The fat man asks who he thinks he is, and whether he is with Hircon. Hircon immediately recognizes that absurd physique and that strange style. There is no doubt who it is. It is Chev, known as Killer Chev, leader of the Red Bulls Guild, one of the top 30 in the game. In Hircon's past life, he was the best warrior class player, and a true combat maniac. The fat man tries to continue the argument, but Chev releases an overwhelming intimidation. The pressure is so intense that it feels like a gust of wind cutting through the area. Everyone around feels the weight of his presence. He says that if it was a fair exchange, then he should return the punch. Upon hearing Chev's name, the fat man's subordinates panic. The aggressor himself starts trembling, and when he realizes Chev is already behind him, he apologizes and runs away. Chev comments that he resolved everything peacefully, which makes several people around question what kind of peace that was. He asks if Hircon is fine, and tells him not to worry about idiots like that. However, Hircon turns and coldly states that next time he does not need his help. The atmosphere becomes awkward. Even Chev seems uncomfortable with the response, but Hircon leaves irritated because he clearly felt the difference in power between them. He cannot stand the feeling of being suppressed. The next time they meet, he swears he will not be the same. Later, inside a dungeon that looks like an old mining cave, Hircon is still thinking about it. In his past life, Sile and Chev were on the same level. If he wants revenge, he needs to become even stronger than both of them. A charcoal tiger appears and lunges at him, but Hircon does not even worry. His skeleton, now far more trained, intercepts the attack with precision and defeats the monster almost alone. The victory grants more experience, and the skeleton seems proud in front of its master. After 3 days of intense training, Hircon finally reaches level 10, even though it took longer than he expected. The system informs him that he can no longer enter beginner training areas, and that the novice mark has been removed. The rewards are being processed. He receives the War Clock, an essential device for any warlord player. The item allows him to view status quests, map inventory, and messages. As he holds it, Hircon realizes it has been a long time since he last used something like that. Hircon then checks checks his status. He is currently level 10 with the Necromancer class. He has 1 title and his attributes are 3 strength, 3 stamina, 5 intelligence, and 5 magic. When he sees that, he thinks it looks absolutely terrible. Now, however, he has 50 points to distribute. It is the first time he is doing this, so he needs to be very careful. As a Necromancer, the obvious choice would be to invest in intelligence and magic, but Harkin decides to do the exact opposite and puts every single point into strength. Now he has 53 strength. With that amount, he can crush practically anything. The skeleton accompanying him looks completely horrified and extremely disappointed with that decision. Harkin notices the reaction and asks what the problem is. In response, he smacks it so hard that the skull flies off. Even so, he explains that he has not given up on being a necromancer. He is doing this to teach it. Increasing magic and intelligence right now would not bring such a big impact. Investing in strength, on the other hand, will allow him to train and teach his movements to the maximum. He is literally betting his own life on the skeleton's learning, which even leaves the creature emotional. Harkin makes it clear that the skeleton will focus on training while he handles everything else. Besides, the system is not the only way to increase attributes. Later, he goes to the Monster Hunting Association branch of Febicus Castle. As soon as he enters, he sees that a new quest is being presented. People are practically pushing each other to grab it. It almost turns into a full-blown fight over that mission. Harkin finds it strange because usually quests at this time of year are pretty bad. Even so, people seem motivated, probably noobs trying to level up fast. He goes to the reception desk and asks for a quest, and to see the available list. The receptionist explains that he can take one from the table and examine it, but warns that those are exactly the ones nobody wants because they are difficult, and the rewards are terrible. He even comments that Harkin has courage. Harkin mentally agrees that most of them are awful, but he knows how to choose. This will be his trump card. Among the options, he finds the perfect quest, the Bima Mountain Cave. The reward is only 10 gold coins, and it involves hunting very low-level monsters. The receptionist finds it odd that he wants something so weak, but for Harkin, that is exactly what he needs. On the surface, it looks like a terrible mission. However, if he completes it before level 15, he can obtain an ultra-rare title called Rising Star. Titles grant status bonuses. Some increase only 1 or 2 points in specific attributes. Rising Star increases attributes by percentage. That means the higher his stats, the greater the gain. This will be the first step toward becoming an extremely broken character in the game. Prepared, Harkin goes to get his new equipment. Later at Bima Mountain, he is ready, determined, and wearing an absurdly ridiculous clown outfit. Even crows attack him, as if he were a scarecrow. He thinks it is embarrassing, but he spent all his money on the skeleton's equipment. When he went to buy his own, only that was left. Even so, there is no point complaining. He will speedrun the quest, and then buy decent clothes, so he starts running in his flashy outfit, determined to finish everything quickly. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, someone is desperately asking for help. That person ends up being dragged away and killed by player killers. Later, a player named Multi arrives at Bima Mountain. He looks talented and is already level 11. He believes he will soon be in the world rankings. On the way, he found someone asking for help because his friend was down. With all his determination, Multi decided to help. The priest explained that a monster had appeared out of nowhere and attacked them. They barely escaped, but they had no potions left to heal their companion. Multi said he had some and that he would help. The priest thanked him greatly, saying he had arrived at the perfect time. However, the moment Multi got distracted, he was attacked from behind and knocked down with a single blow. The priest thanked him again, but this time for the items he had just obtained. Multi even questioned whether it had been a trap, and the priest replied that he himself had been foolish to fall for it. Thus, Multi died and dropped his war watch. The assassins commented that he really was a noob. He made a frightened expression. The priest then told his men it was time to look for the next idiot. That group was the Ralph family, the infamous gang known for killing players and stealing their items. Meanwhile, Harkin was with his skeleton, now fully equipped, facing different wolves, this time made of wood. He activated the skeleton's attack mode, and the creature became completely enraged. It charged forward at absurd speed, and in the next second, the 3 ancient wolves were already dead. For defeating each of them, the skeleton received 375, 366, and 379 XP respectively. Hirokon realized that now, with a real sword, his skeleton could handle many monsters on its own. He confirmed that he had made the right choice by prioritizing his summons equipment. A true gamer does not care about appearance, but even so, he was way too ugly. The skeleton seemed to feel pity for its own master. Harkin noticed that look and asked what that was about. Right after, he said he already knew that place well, and that they needed to move. He urgently needed money to get rid of those terrible, pitiful, and tragic clothes. However, when they started walking, the skeleton was hit by an arrow straight in the head. Not even Harkin expected that. A man approached apologizing, saying he thought it was a monster, and that was why he shot. It was the Ralph family again, pretending to be victims. The priest apologized repeatedly, but Harkin easily noticed the war watches on their wrists and the blood-stained weapons. It was clear they were player killers, the famous PK. Even so, he said it was fine, and that he would love a mana potion if it was not too much trouble. The priest replied that unfortunately, they were also out of potions, but suggested they could help each other level up, since mana recovered automatically when leveling. Harkin said that if that were true, it sounded great. The priest confirmed, and stated that since the mistake had been theirs, they could make up for it by helping. Monsters soon appeared. The plan was simple. simple. They would deal damage and leave the final blow to Harken. However, as they advanced, the priest reinforced the real plan among the group members. First they would lure all the monsters, then they would use a spell to strengthen them. After that, they would throw the creatures onto the target. In panic, he would die easily, but when they put the plan into action, everything went wrong for them. Harken killed the wolf as if it were nothing. He even praised the Ralph family, saying they were good. The group began to suspect that summon was much stronger than they had imagined. Maybe his level was higher than they had thought. They then decided to throw several wolves at once. At the same time, a player armed with a mace tried to attack Harken from behind, but he dodged easily. The attacker was shocked to realize that summoner was far too fast. With a single strike, Harken cut through the mace and the player himself, bringing the criminal down. He ordered the little skeleton to deal with two of them while he advanced. The skeleton became completely enraged and ran alongside its master toward the Ralph family. The priest still tried to ask for a truce, but it was useless. Two members were quickly killed by Harken and his skeleton. He commented that he knew that kind of people very well, the type that gains your trust and then stabs you in the back in the dirtiest way possible. The old Harken would have fallen for that, but not anymore. The priest begged for a moment, said they could talk, that they could keep his items, but that they should not kill him. Harken replied that it was too late and that he no longer believed in people. Then he finished killing the two of them. The Ralph player died and 8 war watches that were not his were dropped. Harken realized it was a good amount and decided to take everything for himself. He would also take the opportunity to grab some decent clothes from them. Meanwhile, the skeleton stepped on the body of the enemy who was already dead, or maybe almost dead, prolonging the suffering with a strange sense of satisfaction. Harken asked what was wrong with him, as if the skeleton also wanted some items for itself. Later, Harken used his necromancy powers to heal the skeleton. Now it was much more equipped and even looked like that famous little skeleton from another work, maybe even inspired by it. Harken asked if he was happy with the new equipment, and commented that appearance did not matter in the game, that what mattered was what was inside. Even so, now the Harken looked stylish. The creature then looked at Harken with an expression that seemed to not believe a single word he had just said. Harken commented that those war watches had been amazing. When someone sells another player's watch, the victim's inventory drops random items. That means it is possible to obtain rare equipment with status bonuses. He ended up getting the Black Goblin Pants, which gave +5 magic and 5 intelligence, the Ancient Essence Sword, which gave +10 magic, a Demonic Curse skill book, and also an absurd amount of gold. It was practically like winning the lottery. Thanks to those idiots, he managed to progress much faster than he had imagined. Then he pulled a mask from his inventory. Harken commented that he would soon start recording his own gameplay, so he needed something stylish. Someone had once told him that this kind of thing needed identity. A guild needed a face, a brand. That was why the name Ha-Ho Masks made so much sense. People were going to love that aesthetic. He thought about completely changing his style, but in the end he returned to the original mask and transformed it into something darker. He decided that he would never again let anyone take what was his. He would prove that he had been right from the beginning, and he would do it from scratch. With the mask equipped, he set off with his little skeleton. Later, in the mountains and peaks, they arrived at the next dungeon, the Bima Mountain Cave. Harken remembered that blue werewolves spawned there. They were stronger, but with the new equipment it should be easy. In 10 minutes he would finish everything. However, hours later, he was completely irritated because absolutely no monsters were appearing. He knew that if someone had recently cleared the dungeon, the system would have notified it. He began to suspect a bug or glitch. He asked what the skeleton was doing, and noticed that the creature was attacking a specific point on the wall. There was a large hidden portal there. It was a secret passage. They had discovered an instance dungeon called Stage. That was why nothing was spawning in the main area. Instance dungeons are randomly generated inside other dungeons. When they appear, the original dungeon counts as cleared. They are much more difficult, but they offer much better rewards. The problem was that it was not possible to leave until completing it or dying. If he died, Hirokin would be unable to play for 2 days. That was too much lost time. The most logical choice would be to retreat. Even so, he entered the stage. If he did not die, everything would be fine. As he crossed the portal, he was blinded by a light. When his vision returned, he realized he was in an open space inside a ruined coliseum, like an ancient arena. The atmosphere was heavy. Soon he heard strong footsteps echoing through the place. In front of him, a blue werewolf appeared. But something was wrong. The system did not even show the creature's level. It was a corrupted werewolf. Before he could properly react, he was struck and thrown against the wall. The little skeleton immediately prepared for battle. Even so, Harken let out a short laugh and commented that his luck seemed great. A corrupted monster was probably important material for the main quest. He warned the skeleton that if they did not bring that thing down, they could say goodbye to dinner. Then he launched into the attack. The little skeleton coordinated the movement, positioning the sword to propel its master. Harken leaped high, preparing an aerial strike. The werewolf saw that as an opportunity to hit him in midair, but he activated Demonic Curse and infused the sword with dark energy. With a single strike, he tore the werewolf's arm off, as if it were butter. The creature screamed in pain while the curse reduced all its stats by 10%. Harken realized the skill was truly powerful, but the werewolf regenerated quickly. Its arm reattached itself, and it grew even more furious, seeming almost larger. The system announced that the corrupted werewolf had become brutally insane, and that its stats were completely nullified, ignoring the previous reduction. Hirokin had already expected that boss to be complicated. He had wanted to save that resource for later, but now it seemed like the perfect chance to test what he could really do. So Harkin activated the Warwatch slot. Instantly, the sealed power was released, and a cloak of darkness covered his entire body. When the energy stabilized, he was wearing armor made of pure shadow. He made it clear that now the real fight was beginning. Inventory activation was an exclusive feature of the game Warlord. When a player activated that ability, they used the raw energy of the game world itself to increase their stats and reshape their body. It was like assuming a second unpredictable form, different for every player. The community called it Frenzy Mode. With the mode active, Harkin called the werewolf to fight. The creature, furious, lunged forward. Its claws nearly hit him, and if they had connected, the damage would have been enormous, but he dodged every following attack. Even so, he found no opening. The werewolf left no room to breathe. It was clearly a fast and powerful boss with the potential to bring him down in a single blow. When the monster charged again, Harkin decided he already had the solution. The power of Frenzy Mode multiplied his attributes several times over. Without hesitation, he delivered a brutal slash from the werewolf's chest to its back. The fight finally became fun. Still, he was almost grabbed by the creature right after. He escaped by a hair's breadth. The boss was still in enraged mode, something he had almost forgotten. In the next second, the werewolf was behind him again. Harkin remained calm and asked if the creature was forgetting something. It was the little skeleton. With a precise strike, it cut off the werewolf's arm once more. Then Harkin ordered them to use the move they had trained together. The skeleton nodded. The werewolf hesitated for a split second, and that was enough. The two executed their combined attack, slicing the creature into several pieces. The system announced that the corrupted werewolf had been defeated, and Frenzy Mode was automatically deactivated. For a first time, Harkin thought it was not bad at all. After leaving the dungeon and completing the letter quest, he received the promised 10 gold coins. However, the reward transformed into a special golden letter. Since the skeleton warrior had defeated a high-level creature, the bone fragment evolved from rank F to rank E. In addition, he received 20,000 gold, the werewolf's hide, and its bones. The little skeleton celebrated excitedly. Harkin concluded that instance dungeons were truly excellent. Among the rewards, he also obtained the corruption tracker necklace. The item increased any attribute related to his class and granted an additional 18 to all stats. It could not be traded with other players and required the corruption tracker title to be used. He began to suspect it was a unique item. He could not sell it, but it was still superior to a common item. Then he noticed something even bigger. He had acquired 3 new titles: Rising Star, which granted 3% more intelligence and magic; Challenger of Heroes, which gave 3 points of stamina; and Corruption Tracker, which still had no description. Harkin immediately understood what that meant. The Corruption Tracker title was the introduction to the first chapter of Warlord's main quest. It was the backbone of the game's story, the central narrative that guided the entire world. That was why the rewards were absurdly good. Every player wanted to enter the main quest, no matter the risk. In his past life, Harkin had barely managed to reach chapter 4. Now he was accessing that content much earlier than expected. It was not just luck, it felt like winning the lottery several times in a row. Satisfied, he celebrated and logged out of the game. Later at home, he watched the announcement from Hydra Guild, which had reached the final stage of the corruption scenario. They promised to clear everything within 3 months. Seeing that, Yahello commented that it was not luck at all. Hydra was already at the final phase, so there would be almost nothing left for him to explore. He realized he might have to ignore Hydra's progress and jump straight to the next chapter, but then he had a realization. That could be the perfect opportunity for him. At that moment, all of Harkin's focus was on the corruption phase. That was the first main quest to be cleared in the entire game Warlord, and he knew very well how significant that was, so he started thinking about something else. What if he uploaded a video about the corruption? Would he not have a super viral video in his hands? Just imagining it, he could already see green dollars dropping into his account. He thought it was great that he had recorded everything. He told himself he would edit it quickly, make a few cuts here and there, and post it, but he also knew the job had to be done properly, and he could only think of one specific person for that: the legendary editor from his past life, who at that exact moment was putting a plate of noodles into her mouth. It was the Romanian filmmaker Romani. When she received the request, she was a little impressed. A player of that level had sent material directly to her. At first, when she saw it was Hirka Dungeon, level 15, she thought it must be just the beginner cave, probably another noob trying to make a viral video. But when she opened the content and saw what had actually been recorded, she was so shocked she almost fell out of her chair. That was not beginner level stuff. Right away she realized that guy could become the perfect model for her work. Later that night, an extremely wealthy woman called in a subordinate. She mentioned that a video about the corruption had just been posted. She found it interesting that a level 15 player had solo defeated a corrupted werewolf. The subordinate explained that the team had already reviewed the video, and that the monster was probably low level. Even so, she said she had really liked what she saw and wanted that player for herself immediately. In real life, that woman was Sil Leonche, owner of Lightning Enterprises, the largest business conglomerate in the world. In the game, she was known as the Queen of Thunder, Sil. Meanwhile, Harkin was in shock over something else. The video had already reached 6,000 views in less than a day. In his past life, it had taken him months to reach numbers like that. He also realized that Romani had not only done an excellent editing job, but was contacting him much more frequently. He had always thought Romani was impossible to reach, but in this new life, she seemed closer and closer. She asked if he had seen the view count. He confirmed that he had. She said that was part part of her job, but that his material was premium. Then she even sent a little roses sticker. Hirokin thought it almost made him want to block her, but he admitted she would still be very useful. Then she asked when the next video would be released. He realized he had no idea what to record. It was not as if another corrupted boss would simply appear in front of him by chance. At that moment, he clicked to connect to the game and thought that at least everything was going as it should. Then he logged into Warlord. At the same time, Shev the Slayer was watching Harkin's video. He admitted that the kid's movements were excellent, but there was something strange. Somehow that style felt familiar. He wondered if he had encountered that player before. That was when Yell, also from Red Bull's guild, showed up asking who he was talking about. Shev explained that it was the guy known as Haho Mask, Harkin himself, the name everyone had been talking about lately. Yell teased him, saying he had been watching that guy non-stop lately, and was starting to look like a weirdo. Even so, Shev commented that the recent news about new players had made him cautious. Still, that guy was very good. Not only did he fight well, he also summoned a skeleton. He was on a completely different level from other necromancers. For a moment, Shev even considered whether he would accept a duel. Yell cut the topic short and said that was enough. If he had time for that, he should hurry up and take care of what he needed to do. There were 5 minutes left before he went live. After all, 200,000 people had bought tickets just to watch Shev the Slayer, leader of the Red Bulls, and 9th place in the world ranking. Right after that, a dungeon portal formed in front of him. He entered frenzy mode and prepared to finish it. He summoned all his units and ordered them to take their positions for battle. Later, at the Monster Hunter Association affiliated with Figus Castle, Harkin complained that there was nothing available, not a single decent quest. As expected, that beginner village did not offer any worthwhile missions. He started thinking that maybe it would be better to forget about making videos for now. That was when the pale clerk at the counter looked at him carefully and asked if it was really him, the player who had cleared Bhima Mountain. Hirkan realized that the clerk was the same one as before. The man introduced himself as Hotan and asked if he had a moment to talk. Later, in a more private office, Hotan explained that he had heard Hirkan had encountered a corrupted monster in the cave on Bhima Mountain. Immediately, Hirkan began to wonder if that kind of event had already existed at that stage of the game in his past life. He confirmed that it had, saying he had seen a werewolf with strange eyes. Hotan said he had suspected as much. He explained that the creature Harkin fought had been exposed to the power of the corrupted one. No one knew exactly who or what the corrupted one was, but its power transformed and altered monsters, making them more brutal and evil. The damage caused by that force in the world was enormous. Because of that, the Monster Hunter Association had placed a very high bounty related to this matter. Hearing this, Harkin grabbed Hotan's arm and said that he would gladly risk his life to bring down that evil being. Deep down, he had already realized that this was a hidden quest. Hotan warned him that he would be dealing with something extremely powerful and corrupted. He said Harkin was not ready for it yet. Even so, Harkin thanked him for the opportunity. Faced with his insistence, Hotan decided to give him a chance. He mentioned an important name, Ahimbri, at Bangsu Castle, located east of Figus Castle. Just hearing Ahimbri's name left Hirkan in shock. Hotan explained that this man could teach him a few things, and that he would write a letter of recommendation. Thus, Hirkan unlocked the secret quest, Teachings of Ahimbri. He needed to find Ahimbri and deliver Hotan's letter. The reward would be a skill book. Harkin's body trembled with excitement. Now the game was truly beginning. He realized he had gained the chance to become a disciple of Ahimbri, one of the 7 disciples of the great mage Bokan. Ahimbri was a legendary NPC, owner of the rarest skill books in the game. Any mage and warlord would do anything to find him. In his past life, almost no one had that opportunity. He suspected it might be related to his Rising Star title, and also to the main corruption quest. The reason did not matter. Now he needed to run as if there were no tomorrow. But before leaving, he remembered that he had something important to take care of. Later, in a forest where leaves fell slowly, Harkin arrived at a clearing. He used a bone fragment, kicking the small skull across the ground, and summoning his little skeleton. Then he realized he still had not properly analyzed the items he had obtained the day before. He could finally use the werewolf skull. The system asked if he wanted to turn the skull into a skeleton warrior. He immediately accepted. The werewolf's traits were incorporated into the small skeleton, increasing its durability by 2 points. After that, Hirkan equipped the corruption tracking necklace. The item increased all his attributes by 18 points, and also strengthened his class skills. Now he was much stronger. Next, he used 2 more bone fragments. 2 small skulls appeared, and transformed into 2 more skeletal companions. The original little skeleton looked completely confused, as if trying to understand whether it now had siblings. Hirkan decided that from that point on, every battle would be fought in a group of 3. They would need to learn how to work together. The first skeleton clearly did not like the idea at all, but Hirkan simply ignored it. Meanwhile, he wondered what kind of monster would appear in that region. It did not take long for them to find out. Soon they were standing before a level 25 forest bear. The creature looked as if it were made of earth covered in grass, with an extremely durable body. A single swipe from it was enough to destroy an entire tree. Hirkan managed to dodge the first charge. When the next attack came with lethal force, he appeared to be in danger, but in reality, he was only drawing the monster's attention. It was time for the soldiers to act. The first skeleton rushed forward with sword in hand. However, its head was grabbed and it was thrown away with ease. Hirkan grew irritated, questioning how it could have taken such an obvious hit. It needed to attack from the enemy's blind spot. The second skeleton charged in with a bit more courage, but the result was the same. It took a heavy blow and was sent flying. Harkon's irritation only increased. He kept repeating that they were supposed to attack from the blind spot. Meanwhile, the bear simply watched. It was not even trying to hit Harkon. It just stood there, observing the scene like a curious spectator, completely calm, almost as if it were waiting for the lesson to end. Harkon was outraged when he realized that the third skeleton had done exactly the same thing as the other two. It had literally seen its companion get smashed and still repeated the same mistake. That training was going nowhere. Even so, a final hope appeared. The armored little skeleton. For a brief moment, Harkon was impressed and wondered if it might actually be different. The skeleton advanced bravely, blade ready, prepared to prove its worth, but it received a brutal slap and had its skull torn off without any difficulty. At that moment, Harkon lost his patience. He called them all idiots. Later, the three skeletons stood side by side, nervously enduring his scolding. He asked if they had brains. Obviously they did not, but it was still incredibly frustrating. He explained that when a monster is attacked, it naturally turns toward whoever attacked it. That always creates a blind spot. It was simple, just attack from the blind spot. But the skeletons remained confused. Harkon began to wonder why he was still trying to explain. He knew his skill had ranked up, and that the necklace allowed him to summon 3 skeletons. The problem was that now he had 3 weak and uncoordinated skeletons. It was useless. They had no teamwork at all. According to the first little skeleton, it had even learned a few things on its own, but coordination was something they had never trained. Worst of all, he was now spending triple the mana and getting even worse results. In the end, Harkon decided to let it go. At least he had reached level 20. For now, his next videos would not be about combat. He told the 3 to get up. That day's training was over. Soon they would reach Bangsu Castle. As he walked, he reflected. He had thought that by becoming a necromancer, his summons would do all the work while he relaxed. But reality was different. It seemed even harder than before. His fate was definitely not an easy one. He continued through the forest until he reached the branch of the Monster Hunter Association at Bangsu Castle. The place was crowded. Players and NPCs were coming and going non-stop. As soon as a few players recognized Harkon, they started surrounding him. They wanted to know what quest he had taken. The energy of the crowd felt like a pack of hyenas. To him, that kind of person existed everywhere. Instead of putting effort into their own quests, they tried to leech off other people's opportunities. A bald player approached and asked if he had any good quest that could be done as a group. Harkon dismissed him immediately. He could not let anyone find out about the Ahimbri quest. Ignoring the commotion, he handed the letter of recommendation to the NPC guarding the staircase. Because of Hotan's recommendation, he was granted permission to pass. The crowd completely lost it when they saw that everyone wanted to get in as well. Excited, Harkon went up the stairs, already imagining what Ahimbri might teach him. It was a hidden quest. Something good had to come out of it. His connections were really paying off. However, when he entered the room, he was surprised. The place was practically a dump. Books were scattered everywhere, piled on the floor, on tables, on chairs. Then a voice asked, who was there? Ahimbri said he did not remember having any appointment that day. He looked like someone who had not slept for weeks. There were books resting on his feet, on his head, and on his arms. Harkon introduced himself and explained that he had been sent by Hotan. Ahimbri studied him for a moment and commented that he seemed to be a dark mage in training, but with potential. Harkon replied that Hotan had been kind to acknowledge him, but that it did not matter much. He was there for the reward. Without hesitation, Ahimbri handed him 2 skill books, one for bone armor and another for Helm of Madness. They were absurdly rare items. The negotiation was over. Ahimbri wished him a safe journey. The quest was completed, but Harkon started wondering what that was supposed to mean. He had thought the quest would have a continuation, maybe other tasks connected to it, something more. So he decided to try his luck. He asked Master Ahimbri for a chance. He said he wanted to learn more, that he wanted more skills. He said he would do anything for an opportunity like that. Immediately, Ahimbri grabbed his hands and asked if he truly meant anything. That promise clearly pleased the old mage. Right after that, Harkon received a new quest, find the egg in the nest. There was no reward listed. At that moment, Harkon began to wonder if he had just been beautifully scammed. Meanwhile, in the city, a knight wearing impressive armor was drawing everyone's attention wherever he went. The equipment was so absurd that people simply stopped to stare. The knight headed toward a great tower rising in the middle of the city. As he looked at the structure, he was certain that was the right place. That was where Haho Mask lived. Meanwhile, Harkon remained confused and irritated, thinking he had truly been tricked by an NPC. He had assumed he would receive a reward for the quest, but instead he was given another quest, without any reward at all. He began to wonder whether it was even worth continuing. The moment he mentioned the quest, a group of nearby players noticed, and immediately piled on top of him, saying he had received a quest, and trying to squeeze any information out of him. Harkon remembered how annoying and invasive these players could be, and he wondered if it wouldn't be easier to just eliminate all of them right there. But before he could react, someone appeared, pulling everyone off him and saving him. This mysterious knight asked for a moment to speak with Harkon somewhere quieter. Harkon grew suspicious, wondering who the guy was, but when the man called him Haho Mask, he decided to follow him. Later, in a silent alley, the knight apologized for the commotion and explained that he simply wanted to talk, but with so many people around it had been impossible. Harkon noticed from the quality of his gear that he had to be high-ranked. Even so, he didn't remember anyone like him from his past life, which made him start wondering whether this guy knew him. The knight, who wore glasses, asked if he was the so-called Haho. Harkon decided that the best strategy strategy at that moment was to pretend he had no idea what he was talking about, so he answered as if he had never heard that name before. The knight then asked whether he had received a quest from an NPC named Ahimbri. Harken became even more suspicious, wondering if he should share any information just because this guy seemed to know too much. He concluded that if the man wanted a fight, he'd better be ready to risk his own account, because Harken wasn't going to back down easily. So Harken flipped the knight off and decided that the best strategy was to keep denying everything and pretend to be just some unimportant idiot, simply to see what the man would do next. What the knight did was extend his hand and apologize, but Harken just called him a coward and said he'd let it slide this time, while still wondering who this guy thought he was, since he clearly wasn't alone and everything seemed to be part of some plan. The knight then commented that Harken was definitely not a professional. While wiping his hand in disgust, he said that if Harken were truly experienced, he wouldn't have left his left hand where he wore a war watch so unprotected. In the shadows, another person was observing everything, wondering whether they should continue monitoring Ahimbri, since the corruption quest was nearly complete, and if someone noticed now, there would be no way to hide it. The knight replied no, because the true main quest was precisely the one called Egg in the Nest, and said it would be better to reduce the number of variables. The person in the shadows returned to their position, and the knight also withdrew. Meanwhile, Harken was watching everything through a window, wondering who the other person involved was. Since they were moving together, he concluded they were probably part of an organization. If they were from a normal guild, they would never have revealed their identities like that. While trying to strike some kind of deal with him, he also realized that the way the knight used his left hand, the one with the war watch, proved they were definitely not rookies. Once again, he wondered who the hell those guys were. Later, while training his skeletons, Harken became certain that there was something special about the Egg in the Nest quest. He concluded that they had probably seen the video he posted, since his channel's name was Haho, and that was why they had come after him. Even so, considering that they had let him go, it seemed that he wasn't exactly their target, or at least not yet. Yes, it was about the quest he had received. Harken had no idea what was going on, but if he continued with that quest, he would definitely run into those guys again. To avoid being tracked, he would have to stop posting videos for a while. He wondered why psychopaths were always getting involved in his life. Meanwhile, Chai, better known as the Storm Queen Sire, was waking up from her capsule. Her secretary Park Suji appeared and said she had done an excellent job. Suji offered her a glass of water while asking how the test for new members had gone. Chai replied that it had been complete garbage. She wondered why no one was even remotely useful to her, and asked if there had been any news about Raho lately. Suji commented that there was still no response from the guy who posted the video, and that he might have even joined another guild. Che asked if it really was another guild, and Suji said she would check again. Che asked for the information to be delivered as soon as possible, and also inquired about the director. Suji said there had been no word from him either. Che remarked that Warlord was becoming powerful, which was why he was staying quiet. She remembered that when she first said she wanted to play these games, he had tried to cancel the marriage. Suji was impressed by Che's incredible figure. Before leaving the room, Chalk ordered a new selection of candidates, and demanded the report by the next day. Suji asked in surprise if it was really by tomorrow, but Chalk simply slammed the door in her face. Suji was left thinking about her boss's difficult temperament. Meanwhile, Harken had gone to a place he hadn't visited in some time, the Lizardmen Swamp. He figured that since Ahimbri was staying at Ban's castle, the quest area had to be nearby. Based on the word egg, he considered that the quest might be related to oviparous monsters, such as birds, reptiles, or insects. The location that fit all of that was precisely the Lizardmen Swamp. He decided to search there first. If he found nothing, he would move on. Harken summoned his little skeleton to test something. Since it was a high-level hunting ground, he thought he should place an enchantment on the summon. He used the skill Helmet of Madness, which marked the skeleton's head with a symbol. That symbol activated the spell, and there was a random chance that the creature would lose its sanity. When he activated the helmet, the little skeleton became extremely buffed, grew horns, and emitted a red aura, looking much stronger and completely insane. Harken told himself the test would begin now, but he failed to pay attention to the part that said the skeleton could completely lose control. The test consisted of attacking its own master. The little skeleton lunged at Harken as if trying to kill him, but Harken retaliated with a punch so strong that he knocked its head clean off. He became irritated, wondering how that summon dared to attack him, and whether it was some kind of bug or if he had been tricked yet again. Suddenly, a level 30 lizard man appeared behind him. Harken thought the test subjects had arrived at the perfect time. He activated Helmet of Madness on all his summons. Every skeleton had its attributes increased and received bone-made armor. Now they were ready to face the lizard men. They charged forward completely insane, and the monsters were no match for them. The lizard men were sliced in half with ease. At that moment, Harken received 864 experience points. Harken thought those enchantments were working great, and decided that next week they would keep repeating the process over and over until they found that damn egg. He figured that if it wasn't in that region, they would move on to the next one without hesitation. What he didn't realize was that someone was watching him with great interest. That person was Ilya, a woman known for her stunning beauty. She was fully aware of it and had no problem admitting it, because it was simply the truth. Everyone around her adored her, and many even offered gifts just because of her looks. Because of that, her life had always been easy. Whenever she she faced a problem, her slaves would handle everything for her. But at that moment, Ilya slipped and fell face first into a puddle filled with slime and filth. Angrily, she thought about how much she hated that place. She remembered that one of her slaves had once brought her there with the promise of helping her level up, but he ended up dying along the way, and now she was alone and stuck in that horrible swamp. Ilya realized the monsters in the area were incredibly strong, but when she saw Hyrcan, she decided he would be her new slave, her new target. She threw herself onto the ground, pretending to be injured, and asked for help, claiming she had been attacked by the monsters in the area. She believed Hyrcan would fall easily into her trap, because no one had ever resisted her charm. It was impossible, in her mind, that anyone would leave someone as beautiful as her lying there in that state. But Hyrcan simply turned his back on her without saying a word. Ilya was completely shocked, unable to believe what had just happened, wondering if he was truly ignoring her beauty. Meanwhile, Hyrcan thought she was just another lunatic trying to trick him. Ilya grew so furious that she bit her own lip until it bled, enraged by the contempt she had received. She wondered how he dared to treat her that way, but Hyrcan remained calm, while his skeletons finished off the surrounding lizardmen. He found the woman incredibly annoying, yet she kept following him, insisting on getting his attention. She continued pretending to be innocent, trying to waste his time, but Hyrcan had already realized there were no decent players in that damn game, and decided the best way to get rid of her was to settle things quickly. He asked if she had lost something. Ilya replied that she had, her sword during the fight in the swamp, and asked if he could help her retrieve it. Hyrcan then asked whether she would leave for good once she got her sword back. Ilya enthusiastically said yes, thanking him while thinking she had finally managed to fool him. Later, she led him to where the sword supposedly was. The object lay on a small island in the middle of the swamp water. Hyrcan reminded her of her promise to leave once the sword was recovered, and ordered his skeletons to fetch the item, since he wasn't stupid enough to risk himself alone. As she thanked him, Ilya thought that necromancers were nothing without their summons. At that moment, she noticed his back was turned and believed it was the perfect chance to kill him. But when she tried to attack, Hyrcan turned around with a psychopathic grin and said she was too slow. He grabbed her by the cloak and hurled her violently in the opposite direction, causing her to fall face first into the swamp water. Furious, Ilya screamed, asking if he thought he could get rid of her that easily, after what he had done, and threatened that her bodyguards would come after him. Hyrcan told her to look behind her. When she turned around, she was met with lizardmen who began devouring her mercilessly. Hyrcan thought that next time, if she wanted to truly deceive him, she would need to do a much better job. He had seen through her from the very beginning, and considered her a complete idiot. He was tired of being tricked by people. He felt he had already wasted too much time on that. Meanwhile, one of his little skeletons was distracted, practicing its charm, and soon the three of them ended up getting smacked around. Hyrcan told them they should learn from him, not from those weirdos. Player Ilya ended up dying, and Hyrcan received a large amount of points for it. He hadn't expected that much experience, and was surprised. He started thinking about what she had said earlier. Those supposed bodyguards sounded like a lie. He bet someone like her didn't even have real bodyguards. But at that very moment, he was already being watched by a group of nerds. Later, still in the swamp, Hyrcan was fighting one of those nerds, when the group's chubby guy declared that Ilya's damned enemy would pay for what he had done. Hyrcan wondered why they were going so far for her. It wasn't as if she was paying them. He found it ridiculous that someone would do all that just to avenge a woman they met inside a game. The chubby guy replied that he did it because he loved her, and was immediately split in half and killed. Hyrcan thought they were all a joke. That crazy woman had tried to trick him and failed. He got rid of her, but now she wanted revenge. It seemed she really did have bodyguards, because when she called for help, it apparently worked. Now all the nerds were after him, calling him Ilya's enemy. Hyrcan found it insane. Every day he ran into a different lunatic in that game. He was also anxious about that damn quest to find an egg. So far he hadn't found anything, and now he had to deal with these idiots too. Hyrcan decided he needed to finish that woman off once and for all, because if he left that place unprepared, he might get into even more trouble. He obtained another war watch and earned 5,000 gold, along with several items including the Necklace of Promise, a super rare item that could be sold for 800,000. Hyrcan thanked the dead nerd for the reward. If they kept coming, he would kill them one by one. Easy money. When another nerd appeared, Hyrcan openly admitted that he was the one who killed Ilya, and warned that anyone who tried anything would end up dead too. But when he realized several of them were coming at once, he ran from that army of nerds. He couldn't understand why there were so many of them. He figured that obsessive woman was taking everything way too seriously. He sent his skeletons into battle, but the nerds weren't afraid. They used the power of love, and unbelievably, it actually worked. They defeated the skeletons with ease, and Hyrcan began to realize those guys were at a higher level than him. He understood that fighting all of them at once was impossible, for now, so he decided he would kill them all once he leveled up. Later, he found himself in a much darker part of the swamp, and thought those nerds were truly persistent. He needed to keep moving to avoid being caught. Then he realized he no longer recognized the place where he was. The environment looked very different from the rest of the lizardman swamp, and he had explored that swamp countless times. Hyrcan began to suspect that this must be related to his quest. Maybe this was the right place. Meanwhile, even the the nerds passed through that area looking for Harkin. When they saw his skeletons, they noticed they were dancing. Confused, they wondered what was going on, calling it a skeleton party. The chubby nerd grew furious at what he saw as the Necromancer's provocation, considering it an insult to Ilya, and charged forward in rage, only to be grabbed by a massive creature he hadn't noticed approaching. He had entered the boss's territory. Everyone panicked when they saw the enormous creature, a level 40 lizard dragon. Harkin, of course, was hiding and realized at that moment that the place he had found was the lizard dragon's nest. This boss had extremely high defense, massive health, and a powerful attack. It required at least 20 level 40 players to defeat it. From what he remembered in his past life, the lizard dragon raid had already been completed some time ago, so normally this boss shouldn't have been there at that moment. However, since his related quest was tied to that location along with the so-called egg, the monster had respawned because of Hyrule mission. In other words, if the lizard dragon was still there, then that was exactly where Hyrule needed to be to complete the quest given by Ahimbri. That was when Hyrule realized something important. Ahimbri had sent him there alone to face a level 40 creature, a true raid boss. Hyrule thought that damn mage was a complete scammer. Still, he felt relieved that he had companions nearby, the nerds who could serve as distractions in the fight against the dragon. The nerds said they could simply run away, but Hirokin had no intention of letting them escape so easily. He cast enchantments on his skeletons and ordered them to surround the group, completely blocking the exit. The nerds complained, saying they could force their way through, but the one who tried was launched into the sky by a single blow from the dragon. The others realized too late that Hirokin was already running. He silently thanked them for their sacrifice, promising never to forget them, since the path was now clear for him to enter the dragon's empty nest. As soon as he entered, he began searching for the egg, but the spot where it should have been was completely empty. Harkon persisted, convinced it had to be somewhere. Eventually, he found something that looked like a very strange egg. In truth, it resembled a stone shaped like an egg, but it vaguely looked real enough, so he decided to take it with him. Soon after, he realized all his skeletons had been destroyed, meaning the dragon was now detecting the last living intruder in the area. The dragon appeared, destroying everything around it, and Hyrule understood he was completely screwed. He knew he couldn't stay in the nest for long, so he grabbed the object that resembled the egg, hoping it truly was the quest item, and if it turned out to be valuable, he hoped even more that it was part of a double quest reward. Later in the swamp, the Legion of Nerds had been completely wiped out. The only one still alive saw Hyrule approaching. Hyrule commented that Warlord was a very interesting game, since it gave freedom even to idiots like them. When the last nerd tried to respond, Hyrule nearly shoved his sword into his face, explaining that he wasn't joking when he played Warlord, he had too much at stake, and next time he wouldn't go easy. He said that both to the nerd and to that damn woman, then walked away, stepping over the scattered bodies. As he walked, Hyrule thought that if they came after him again, it would turn into a real war. Now he wanted to make some serious money, so he decided to sell the exact location of the lizard dragon for 100,000 gold. Later, he went to deliver the egg directly to Ahimbri, claiming he had brought the item that was requested. Hyrule hoped it was the correct one, because he never wanted to return to that swamp again. Calmly, Ahimbri confirmed that it was exactly the item he had been searching for. He praised Hyrule's work, saying he had been much faster than expected, especially for someone like him. Hyrule wondered if he would be humiliated by that NPC every time he completed a quest, then asked what the next step would be. Ahimbri explained that whenever they investigated areas where monsters were becoming mutated, that type of object was always found. For now, he had named it the Stone of Corruption. At that moment, Hyrule understood why those two people had been after him. The Stone of Corruption was an extremely important item for the game's main quest. It became clear that those players only wanted to ensure they got their hands on that egg, because it directly impacted the progression of Warlord's main storyline. Hyrule felt completely deceived by that mission. He had never imagined he was directly involving himself in the entire game's main quest. While trying to process everything, Ahimbri apologized, saying that perhaps the mission was too big for someone at Hyrule's level. They were dealing with an overwhelming and still unknown power, and he needed Hyrule's to prove his worth. Ahimbri asked what he thought about it, and whether he was ready to face the corruption. Hyrule's thought he had more than enough willpower, and that participating in the main quest was a golden opportunity. He declared he would fight with body and soul, but Ahimbri interrupted him, explaining that it was not yet time, since the monsters were far too strong, and he didn't believe a novice like Hyrule could defeat them. Hyrule began to wonder if his level was truly too low to continue the mission. Then Ahimbri said he could help, but on one condition: if Hyrule said the words, "Please, O great mage Ahimbri, make me your disciple," then he would accept him as an apprentice and teach him. Later, Hyrule left Ahimbri's house extremely irritated after accepting that damn mission. He complained to himself that the mage was a perverted bastard and that he hated him deeply, especially for making him repeat that embarrassing phrase 3 times in a row. Meanwhile, in the Lizardman Swamp, the raid finally defeated the lizard dragon, bringing the entire battle to an end. This was only possible because Harkin himself had sold the dragon's exact location, and the group celebrated the victory enthusiastically. The person who contributed the most during the raid's preparation was the glasses-wearing knight, the same one who had been after Harkin earlier. He thanked everyone for their support, and naturally, the players wanted to share a large portion of the reward with him. They said that without him they would never have succeeded, but the knight, known as Heaper, refused any kind of compensation, stating that he hated breaking the rules. The other players were confused, wondering if he truly didn't want want the money. Some even thought he did all of that just to help people. As he walked past them, Heaper stated that all the items inside the nest belonged to the group, but internally, he was thinking about how lucky he was to have had that opportunity. He had never imagined he would get the chance to lay his hands on the Stone of Corruption. As soon as he heard that the lizard dragon had respawned, he feared that the Haho mask might also be involved, but when he learned the dragon was still alive, he saw a real opportunity. So he ran straight to the nest with the goal of claiming the Stone of Corruption. But when he arrived, the place was completely empty. The stone was gone. He became so frustrated that he shouted in rage. Later, Jae-san commented that he could finally fulfill his wish. After going through so much pain and hardship, he now had enough money to do what he wanted most. He said that with all that cash, he could finally buy meat, and after so long, he would be able to eat properly again. Jae-yuan mentioned that he had earned a lot of extra money by killing those nerds, so he converted everything into real currency, thinking his life was finally set. But as soon as he made the deposit, it felt like being stabbed in the chest. His credit card took a portion, household bills took another, and rent swallowed the rest. In the end, there wasn't even enough money left to order a simple meal, let alone meat. Jae-hyun wondered why he was so broke despite working so hard and fighting so much, yet still ending up in the same place. Then he received a message from Romeni, asking if he was still alive. She said she wanted to make more videos with him. Jae-hyun realized he had completely forgotten about her, with everything that had been happening. Maybe he really couldn't make videos while those idiots were chasing him, but he also felt he shouldn't worry so much that he ended up starving. At the end of the day, he was just an innocent player trying to survive in the middle of chaos. Jae-hyun decided he couldn't keep living like that anymore, so he resolved to do everything his own way. Later, he appeared inside a dungeon known as the Cemetery, in the Forest of the Dead, ready to record his next adventure. Harkin commented that the place was scarier than ever, but even so, it was the best spot to farm XP at his current level, and he thought that was simply wonderful. Besides being efficient for leveling up, that dark atmosphere brought in a lot of views for the videos he produced. He had already warned the little skeletons that they would start farming, but before that, the group gained a new member. Now they would mix physical attacks with magic, because Hyrkin had managed to summon the skeleton mage. He only obtained that spell thanks to a Himbri, who had provided the magic necessary to perform the summoning. The greater Hyrkin's proficiency, the more powerful his skeleton mage became. It was an extremely strong spell, but it consumed mana at an absurd rate, so he needed to use it strategically. The plan for the day was to hunt other skeletons, but at level 33, the small group was clearly frightened by that, but Hyrkin did not care about fear. He said the target had appeared earlier than expected, and that there was no reason to stand around. While the little skeletons showed hesitation, he explained that once they started fighting, they would realize those enemies were different, and that hiding would not help at all, because he had a lot to do and could not waste time. Even against their will, Hyrkin forced them to advance. With the first strike from the little knight, half of a skeleton's skull was torn off, but the creature kept moving, which left the small knight terrified. At that moment, Hyrkin explained that ordinary attacks did not work properly against that type of enemy. Then he grabbed his mage hammer, a rare item that granted 3 additional strength points, and crushed the opponent's skull, violently throwing the remains aside. He tried to show his skeletons that it was not that difficult, but they were still trembling, so he made the objective of the day clear, which was to take down 100 skeletons in 100 minutes, more specifically in 1 hour and 40 minutes. He even threatened to leave them behind in that field if they did not reach the goal, which made them obey immediately. Even shaken by fighting creatures similar to themselves, the little skeletons began taking down several enemies, and the pace became excellent. Hyrkin imagined it would take longer for them to adapt, but the squad was doing better than expected. He was already thinking about editing the video, and even considered contacting Romeni, because he was sure the content would turn out very good. Then the ground began to shake with heavy footsteps. A level 35 skeleton warrior appeared, an elite monster that spawned extremely rarely. Harkin realized it was a huge opportunity, and thought that enemy would basically be his dinner, already imagining the rewards. When the skeleton warrior attacked, the blow destroyed everything around it, forcing Harkin and his army to dodge. He recognized that if he had been hit directly, he would be in serious trouble, but at least he managed to break the enemy's arm. Shortly after, the little knight created an opening for Harkin to strike the enemy with the hammer, damaging the warrior's knee plates. Even so, the skeleton warrior remained standing, and charged again. Harkin was already expecting that impatient reaction, and knew there was one more strike prepared. The final attack came from the skeleton mage, who launched a massive fireball, and completely incinerated the enemy. With the victory, Harkin was satisfied with the enormous amount of experience gained, and was already calculating that the moment would bring at least 1,000 views once it was published. The smell that reminded him of barbecue even made him hungry, but then the system alerted that the field boss had sensed the death of a subordinate and located the intruder. Before them appeared a terrifying creature, a skeleton with magical powers known as the Golden Skeleton, level 40. He was the field boss of the Forest of the Dead, and the first magical type boss introduced in the game. He was so powerful that he had a reputation as the #1 enemy of beginner players. At that moment, Harkin realized that the condition for the boss to appear might have been eliminating skeletons in large numbers, something he had completely forgotten. He understood that the battle would be extremely difficult, but he also knew that if he managed to win, the rewards would be enormous. In addition, Harkin knew exactly how to defeat that creature, so he had already ordered his little skeletons to prepare. But the system warned that all of of them had disappeared because he was out of mana. At that moment he found it strange, but soon realized it made sense. He had summoned 4 skeletons, including the skeleton mage, and had forced all of them to use their maximum power right at the beginning to clear the 100 skeletons from the field. The mistake was not having considered his own mana consumption. Now there was no other choice but to face the golden skeleton alone. Even so, Harkin saw it as a good opportunity to stretch his muscles and test his own limits. He activated Gilfa's transformation and summoned the power of the masked Black Knight, getting ready for combat. Without showing fear, he charged at the boss, who was already preparing a spell. The field practically turned into a minefield of lightning made of light, greatly limiting his ability to dodge. It was no wonder the golden skeleton was known as the killer of rookies. Harkar knew that if the fight dragged on and the boss kept casting magic non-stop, he would be finished, so he needed to stop the enemy from continuing to cast. His first action was to break the hands that were joined together, while the boss formed magical circles. Each pair of hands supported one circle, so by destroying one of them, he managed to interrupt part of the casting. Only 2 active circles remained, and Hirokun decided he would smash all those hands until they turned to dust. But that was not the golden skeleton's only ability. The system warned that the boss had stared directly at Harkin, understood his intentions, and changed strategy. The 2 remaining hands shifted into a new position, forming an even more powerful spell, something Harkin did not remember ever seeing before. A laser fired, destroying everything in its path. He barely avoided being hit, managing to dodge at the last instant. The Forest of the Dead began to look like a true battlefield. Harkin felt confused, trying to remember whether that secret attack pattern had always existed, or if the boss had been updated, just like the Minotaur. It had been years since the last time he had faced the golden skeleton, and that uncertainty was dangerous. Without his army, and having lost his main attack plan, he began to wonder how he would defeat that monster. For now, he decided to do what he did best, which was observe and adapt. He started dodging the following beams, realizing he still had enough speed to predict the timing of the shots and avoid the blows. The problem was that he could not keep that up forever. He needed an opening, but the unexpected happened when the golden skeleton attacked without using magic, advancing physically. Hirokun was grabbed by the boss and received a brutal blow, while realizing that the next ability would be a laser aimed directly at his face. At that critical moment, he activated his trump card, awakening the demonic curse. All of the boss's attributes were reduced by 13%, creating the gap he needed to break free. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he struck the enemy directly in the face with a hammer blow, so powerful that the golden skeleton crumbled. The system confirmed the boss's defeat, granting 97,000 gold, the title Skeleton Slayer, and another level up. Even with the victory, Harkin acknowledged that the fight had been desperate, and that if it had lasted a few more seconds, he might have died. He then asked to see his stats. He was level 36, had 9 titles, 109 strength, 35 stamina, 101 intelligence, and 141 magic. He realized he had jumped straight to level 36, and celebrated internally. But he also understood that the situation was becoming risky. Although 141 magic was not a low value, it was still not enough for what he planned to do. Up until that moment, he had been stacking multipliers and experience bonuses, but he had many spells and too little mana reserve to sustain long battles. He had invested heavily in strength to empower his warrior skeletons, but now he was starting to fear running out of mana again in a future, more difficult battle. The biggest problem was that he had already obtained all the titles that increased magic and did not have enough money to buy items that would raise that attribute even further, which made it clear that he would need to find a new strategy if he wanted to keep advancing safely. Even with all those concerns about mana and attributes, Harkin decided he did not want to think about it right now. The plan was simple: send the video to Romeni, reach level 40, and only then decide what to do. At the moment, what he really wanted was to eat a good piece of meat. When Romeni watched the recording, she was so excited that she actually punched her own desk, unable to believe what she was seeing. It was real. That kid had defeated a monster of that level all by himself. She was impressed by the way Harkin commanded his summons, by how he moved, and by his perfect combat awareness. To her, that was pure talent. She knew the video was still raw, but it was so good that it almost felt wrong to edit it. Even so, she would do her job and send the final cut later. The only question was the title, until she had the perfect idea and decided to call it Emperor of Solo Plays. Later, at the Monster Hunter Association branch of Bounce Castle, Harkin showed up to speak with Ahimbri. He said he had returned even stronger, but Ahimbri asked what had happened to him, because he looked like he had just crawled out of a dumpster. Harkin thought it was Ahimbri's fault in the first place, but chose not to comment and asked to move straight to the reward. Ahimbri agreed and handed over Ahimbri Techniques Volume 2. Along with it, Harkin received the skillbook Skeletonology, a necromancy skill that could not be purchased even with real money. Its initial proficiency was rank F, but simply possessing the skill increased all his skeleton stats by 5%, reduced the mana cost to summon them by 10%, and allowed him to summon one additional skeleton. Harkin was extremely satisfied and thanked the master, thinking that was already more than enough, but Ahimbri revealed there was another reward. He had used the corruption stone Harkin brought earlier to create a ring that tracks the power of corruption. With it, he would be able to hunt sources of corruption independently. The ring was unique grade, granted 2 additional points to all class-related stats, 9 to all general attributes, and when combined with other items from the corruption tracking set, increased stats by an additional 21. Harkin practically drooled upon hearing that, convinced it was one of the most overpowered items someone could obtain from the main quest. But Ahimbri closed his hand and said that, thinking about it, maybe he should not hand over something so powerful so easily. He teased Harkin, telling him to take the ring if he could. Irritated, Harkin charged forward, even activating Gilon's transformation. After settling the situation, he left with the corruption tracking ring equipped, calling Ahimbri a lunatic and thinking that if he were not an NPC, he would have done something worse. With the ring in hand, the next mission was unlocked. Ahimbri explained that they had lost contact with Agent Miggy and that Harkin should go to Tsuryu Castle to check what had happened. He accepted, but he knew it was an extremely high-risk zone and that it would be difficult just to reach Miggy, let alone complete the mission. At that moment, he received an urgent message from Romeni. The video of the Golden Skeleton's defeat had reached 2.3 million views. Despite that, it only had 1,000 likes, which left Harkin outraged at the lack of engagement. Even so, when he saw the total earnings, he was shocked. He had made over 1 million won. His reaction was immediate. He started thinking about tomahawk steak, premium ribs, and every type of meat he could buy. It felt like winning the lottery. He had always known that sooner or later he would blow up. Excited, he decided he would log out and spend the money without thinking twice. But before that, he received another message. This time, a donation accompanied by a notice. Someone said they had tried to contact him through direct messages several times without success. It was the recruitment manager from the Thunder Hunters Guild, wanting to make an offer. When he saw the guild's name, Harkin immediately remembered Sile, known as the Thunder Queen. In his past life, when he refused to join the guild, he had been pursued and pressured several times. To him, it felt like a true deja vu. He had already refused countless times in the past, and knew the persistence would not change anything. Without hesitation, he decided he did not want to join. One of the mercenaries commented that Harkin was very lucky, and that anyone there would love to receive an offer from the Thunder Hunters Guild, especially one made by Sil herself, who was rich, powerful, and influential. In practice, all of his friends wanted to be in his place, except for him. Another even said Harkin was practically addicted to the game, because whenever he entered a raid, everyone talked about him, and that his level was far above most players. Even so, Harkin made it clear that it was already enough. He did not care if the salary was $1 million or any other absurd amount. He would never join that guild. He preferred to continue peacefully with his own companions, believing that once his guild became strong enough, the money would come naturally. It was precisely because of money that he had been betrayed in his past life, and now he realized the signs had been right in front of him the entire time. Even so, he slapped his own face to snap back to reality and decided he could not act like an idiot. Instead of spending everything impulsively, he chose to reinvest every coin to become even stronger because he still had a lot of work ahead. Right after that, he summoned his skeleton army again. They appeared irritated, asking where the golden skeleton was. Harkin explained that he had already taken care of it while they were resting. The hellish training was back, and the focus now would be optimizing movements, improving attacks, and refining the group's synchronization. He asked if they were willing to face that. If he had said something like that to his old companions in his past life, he probably would have heard complaints about exhaustion and requests for rest, but his skeleton simply accepted the challenge. At that moment, Harkin thought that this time he truly had real allies, and that everything would be different. The next destination was Tsuryu Castle, and the training would begin along the way. The plan was simple: run there. Anyone who could not keep up would be left behind. As soon as the order was given, the little skeleton sprinted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Sil was deep in thought, sitting atop a pile of dragons she had defeated with her own power. Standing before her was Hechi, one of her subordinates in the guild. He thanked her for the meeting, and Sil asked if there were any updates regarding the mission connected to the corrupted power. Hechi reported that they had not discovered any new clues, and still did not know how to advance to the next phase. Sil showed irritation as she remembered that they had lost that mission to the Hydrus. Hechi tried to calm her, saying they would soon find a solution, especially with their participation in the meeting of the 30 largest guilds in the game. Sil, however, did not believe that a table full of leaders discussing things would solve anything. Back in reality outside the game, Jaehyun paid off his debts and invested the remaining money to strengthen his character. In the end, he was completely out of funds, but he knew he needed to test his new abilities. The first was skin stitching, a passive skill that increased defense by grafting monster parts onto his own skin. If he took too much damage, the graft would need to be replaced. He decided to start by using the horn of the skeleton warrior. After integrating the material into his helmet, he gained 5 additional points of passive defense. To test it, he struck his own body with his weapon, and barely felt the impact, which exceeded his expectations. The second skill was Curse of Sloth, capable of reducing the enemy's speed and movements. The larger the area, the number of targets, and the level of slowing effect, the higher the mana cost. To test it, he used it on one of his own skeletons, which became almost completely paralyzed. Harkin immediately realized how useful that would be in combat. Finally, there was the skill he wanted the most: Golem Summoning. It was the hardest to obtain and promised to bring a powerful new member to his army. Hirokin commented that now it was finally worth being a Necromancer, because the Golem would be the best possible tank for the team. In addition, he activated Copy Mode, which made the Golem replicate his exact movements. With the combined speed and strength of the two, the synergy had everything to be absurd, but in practice the golem did not repeat the strike immediately. At first, Harkin thought it was a bug in the game. It made no sense for it not to work, but a few seconds later the golem executed the same movement, only with a huge delay, more than 10 seconds of lag. He concluded that it could only be some cursed RNG interfering with the mechanics, which made the skill far less efficient than he had imagined. Meanwhile, the meeting of the largest guilds in the game was beginning. Nergal, master of the Ares Guild, thanked everyone for attending. Despite being busy leaders, Shev commented that it was the usual crowd, and Berg, master of the Big Smile Guild, did not look even slightly cheerful. Sully was also quiet, clearly dissatisfied. Berg pointed out that out of 29 invited guests, only 4 had shown up. Shev replied that having 4 leaders present was already impressive, since it was practically impossible to gather representatives from the 30 largest guilds. Nergal reinforced that the situation was unprecedented. In the world of Warlord, the top 30 guilds were usually locked in constant disputes over resources and power, so they rarely sat down to talk. But the agenda that day was urgent. The Hydra Guild had discovered the true identity of the corrupted Count, and was planning the final raid within a month. Shev acknowledged that it was huge news, since no other guild had managed to find solid evidence until then. Berg warned that if Hydra got their hands on the corrupted Count, they would monopolize all the main quests related to corruption. Irritated, Sile told him to stop complaining and stay focused. Shev tried to calm things down, while Nergal emphasized that fighting among themselves would only further reduce their chances of confronting Hydra. His proposal was clear: to form an anti-Hydra alliance. United, they could prevent the monopoly over the main quests. Shev admitted he did not like alliances, but recognized there was no alternative. Berg also agreed, though reluctantly. Scylla remained dissatisfied, but she knew that if Hydra conquered that mission, the balance of the game would change completely. Later, alone, Sile reflected that it was humiliating to have to join forces with leaders she considered pathetic, all because she had not handled the first boss of the first chapter the way she wanted. Even so, she decided to keep a low profile and plan carefully. Through her phone, she ordered everyone in her guild to monitor every movement of Hydra. They would take down the corrupted Count as well, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Herken finally arrived at the Suryu Castle branch. There, he received confirmation that the mission required him to go to Baboru Forest, where Agent Meiji had disappeared while investigating the corruption stone. The problem was that Baboru Forest was filled with level 70 monsters, a death zone for someone at his level. The mission officer made it clear that this was exactly why they were sending Master Ahimbri's disciple. If he refused, the corruption tracker title could be revoked. Harkon was stunned to discover that this was actually possible. Later, analyzing the mission details, he realized the magnitude of the problem. The reward was 500 gold plus bonuses, but the penalty was losing the title if he failed to complete it within 29 days. That also meant being disqualified from the main quest. He began to understand that all the previous missions he had completed were above the recommended level, which had forced the system to unlock something even more absurd: a mission designed for players level 60 or higher. The plan had backfired. Giving up was not an option, but entering Baboru Forest at that moment would be practically suicide. That was when he overheard rumors in the square, saying that the Hydra Guild was about to clear the main quest and become the top one in the game. Some people commented that the other major guilds would not allow that to happen, but someone raised a troubling question, asking what would happen if all corruption-related missions simply disappeared. At that instant, Harkon realized he might not need to go to Baboru Forest immediately. Perhaps there was another way to interfere in the progression of the main quest before Hydra finished everything. While he processed that possibility, a group of Hydra scouts was already on the move, preparing their next step. They were saying they were finally close to the last mission. Beside the subordinate stood Nadal, the 8th in command of Hydra. The group believed that by defeating the corrupted Count, they would receive magnificent rewards and secure first place for the guild. Even so, Nadal remained cautious, and made it clear they had not won anything yet, because this was only the beginning. Their current task was simply to observe the castle in secret. If any information leaked, it would be the end for all of them. Hydra was known for being extremely professional, so any mistake could ruin everything. Suddenly a man appeared calling out to Nadal. It was Kims, rank 3 of Red Bulls. He approached casually, asking how things were going. Nadal immediately found it strange to see someone from Red Bulls there. Kims explained that he was farming in the area, hunting a powerful boss he had wanted to face for some time, and hinted that maybe Nadal was there for the same reason. Natal confirmed nervously, trying to maintain his composure. Kims noticed the tension and began to provoke him, suggesting that he looked far too uncomfortable. The situation almost spiraled out of control, and Natal's subordinate had to hold him back to prevent an impulsive reaction. However, what no one there knew was that Kims was acting as a double agent. Right after that, he confirmed to his allies that the 8th in command of Hydra was indeed at that cliff, which meant the anonymous information they had received was true. Chev was surprised by the confirmation, and Yell also could not believe the data was accurate. She questioned why someone would leak such important information for free. Chev suggested it might be someone inside Hydra seeking revenge. For Kims, however, the reason was irrelevant, because what mattered was that the location had been confirmed. He asked leader Shev if they should cause some chaos right there, but Shev refused. If that truly was the castle of the corrupt Count, most of Hydra's firepower would be concentrated there. In addition, Kims could not be killed in that location, even though he himself downplayed his importance within the guild. The situation changed when someone attacked Kims directly. He realized he had been caught red-handed. The one who appeared was Hahui, known as the Thunder Princess of the Thunder Hunters. She demanded that he tell her everything, if he did not want to lose his head. Meanwhile, far from there, Haikern was training his golem, making it fight against a bear. The golem was slow in its attacks but extremely durable. The skeletons watched everything as if it were a private show. Hikern had still not received any response about the information he had leaked. He concluded that if he wanted to complete his mission without going to the Boboru forest, he would have to force the end of that chapter. The main quest of Warlord was divided into multiple chapters. At the moment, everyone was in the first one, called Corrupt Count. As soon as the count was defeated, the chapter would end, and all related quests would be automatically cancelled. Harkin knew it was impossible to reach level 70, complete every quest, and still defeat the count in less than 30 days, especially with Hydra already keeping an eye on the castle. Because of that, he decided it would be better to use the remaining time to prepare for the next chapter. Deep down, he wanted someone to eliminate that cursed count as soon as possible. That was when he received a notification saying that Hydra's official channel had started a live stream. At the same time, his golem was about to lose the fight against the bear. Without patience, Harkin solved the situation with a direct blow to the bear's head, ending the fight quickly so he could watch the broadcast. Everyone stopped to watch the live stream, including the golem. The official announcement from the Hydra Guild stated that they were about to reveal the true identity of the corrupt count. In addition, they planned to start the final raid and announce the official date of the attack. Harkin hoped it would happen within that same month. Then the announcement came. The raid would take place in 3 days. At first, he thought it was a little earlier than expected, but deep down, he realized it was perfect for his plans. In the following days, he continued training, once again making his golem fight the bear. Even so, his real concern was Hydra. They were far ahead of the other guilds and had several strong players. Still, Harkin believed that when the main quest ended, many of his own problems would also be resolved. 3 days later, however, Hydra's raid failed. Hirokin could not believe what he was seeing. After so many promises, he had expected a solid plan. He realized he might have overestimated the guild. Faced with that unexpected failure, he concluded that he needed to come up with a new plan. It was at that moment that Red Bull started their own live broadcast. Harkin knew that was the guild led by Killer Shev. They were there precisely in case Hydra failed. Now it was their turn. The plan was to face the same enemies that had crushed Hydra, but this time far more prepared. They would also challenge the final raid. When he saw that, Harkin thought it was extremely irresponsible, because it looked like a decision made on impulse. But something happened that he did not expect. Sile, the Thunder Queen, appeared alongside the Red Bulls, accompanied by the Thunder Hunters. The two guilds had formed an alliance. Then it showed what had happened earlier. Cho-Won was surprised to see Sile there. He did not expect to run into her at that moment, and even thought it might be a declaration of war. But Sile made it clear that was not the case. They were now allies. Cho-Won questioned the alliance, reminding her that one of his men had been attacked by one of her girls. Sile replied that it had only been an attempt to get closer, nothing more. Without wasting time, she got straight to the point. She wanted to talk about the raid. She already had enough information about what was happening. It was obvious that Shev and the Red Bulls had rushed to the castle because of a tip they had received. He confirmed they had indeed received anonymous information, but he had no idea who had sent it. Then Silorns asked the most important question. She wanted to know if he truly believed Hydra could defeat that raid. Shev said it was hard to say, but Silor was convinced Hydra would fail because they were moving too fast and without proper planning, only to secure first place. They were about to face the main quest boss of the game, not an ordinary enemy. Shev realized she had not come just to talk about Hydra, so he asked what the real purpose of the conversation was. That was when Sil proposed a formal alliance to face the corrupt count raid together. She was certain that united, they would be the first to clear that dungeon. At that moment, Shev thought she might be bluffing, but in the present, he realized Sil was extremely skilled. And then the two guilds stood face to face with the corrupt count, the final boss of the first chapter of the main quest. The count declared he would trample over all those pathetic beings, while the front line of both guilds struggled against the horde of monsters. The Red Bulls were starting to give in. Sile was also worried, because every time she cut off one of the count's tentacles, another grew in its place. Shev created an opening for her to advance. She dodged the boss attacks with precision and moved in to finish the fight. However, she was struck directly and pierced by several tentacles. Even so, she remained alive, managed to break free, and delivered a brutal strike that split the corrupt count's face in half. Shev acknowledged that she was even more terrifying than he had imagined. Thus, the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters guilds defeated the corrupt count. Watching that, Harkin wondered if she had truly been the one to clear the dungeon, but deep down, it did not matter. He had wanted that chapter to end anyway. It made no difference who had delivered the final blow. He thought Sile could celebrate as much as she wanted. That would be her last great moment of happiness. They might have won the battle, but the war, in his view, was still far from over. A few days later, Harkin was already getting himself into trouble again. He wondered why that always happened to him. Hours earlier, he had entered the mountain-blocked field, a restricted area until certain conditions were met. Now that the corrupt count had been defeated, that region marked the beginning of the second chapter of the main quest. He was the first player to enter the location, earning 2 extra points in all stats, and 1 more point in attributes related to his class. Excited, he told his skeletons it was time to shine. However, he was soon surrounded by several level 60 wild boars, while he was still level 41. Level 60 wild boars were ferocious monsters that moved in groups. Faced with the level difference, Harkin started running, questioning his own bad luck. Even so, he knew he could not waste that opportunity. He was the only one who had discovered that hidden path so far. The chances were low, but he would try anyway. Then he placed a helmet on each skeleton's head and ordered them to charge at the boars. As expected, expected, they were all destroyed within seconds, but Hirokin had already counted on that. It was part of the plan. It was just a trap. Taking advantage of the opening, Harkin cast the curse of slowness on the boars. With them restrained for a few seconds, he rushed in to attack, but ended up slipping on a banana peel and falling flat on his face. The one responsible was an armored monkey that loved playing pranks on humans. The fall caused the curse effect to break, and the boars nearly reached him. At the last instant, someone saved him by firing several extremely powerful arrows at the monsters. A hunter NPC approached him right after. Meanwhile, at Suryu Castle, everyone was talking about a player wearing the full white mamba set. He was there to meet his informant, and asked Mikkel whether she had already discovered the identity of the one who had leaked the information. Mikkel replied that she had not. No guild knew who had sent the tip. They were talking about someone who already knew the identity of the corrupt count, and had given the information away for free, which made everything even stranger. He asked if there was any trace of Haho Mask. Michelle explained that he was only uploading normal monster hunting videos, and that it made no sense for a novice like him to know something so important. She also commented that he would be quite busy from then on. The man stated that he would handle that part while she focused on finding the specific person behind the leak. He did not know who it was, but he promised to make them pay, because that person was breaking the balance of the world. At that very moment, the one disrupting that balance was Harkin, who was now inside the hunter's cabin. He had been extremely lucky. The NPC who saved him was Ma Wong, a central figure in the second chapter of the main quest. Ma Wong had once been the personal instructor of the prince, but was expelled after an unfortunate incident. After that, he became captain of the Forest Watchers, responsible for protecting the Bolkas Mountains. He was the essential NPC to advance in the second chapter, and meeting him like that was pure luck. Even so, Ma Wong told Harkin that he should go back to where he came from, because that region was infested with dangerous monsters. Harkin then revealed that the corrupt count was dead, and explained that even so, the corruption was still spreading. He said he was investigating the origin of the problem, and had ended up there. He asked if Ma Wong had anything in mind. The hunter replied that he had a suspicion, although still without solid proof, and asked whether Harkan would be willing to help. With that, Harkan received the title, the first to act in contact with the protector of Bolkas, gaining 14 more points in all his attributes. He loved that kind of reward, and became even more excited about that quest line. Ma Wong asked him to stay calm and investigate the monsters in the nearby area. The mission was to defeat 50 creatures from the Bolkas Mountains, in exchange for 500 gold and Ma Wong's trust. Harkin left the cabin satisfied. Thinking he really needed to level up, he decided to leave the stronger monsters for later, and start with the easiest target. The armored monkey would be the first. Meanwhile, the monkey continued having fun knocking down NPCs with his banana peels. It was his favorite activity. Suddenly, Harkin appeared beside him, determined to get revenge. He tried to hit him several times, but the monkey was too fast and dodged easily, which only increased Harkin's irritation. He realized he could only defeat him with a surprise attack, since the armored monkey was extremely agile, especially in the trees, so he threw his sword as a distraction. The strike missed, and the monkey began to laugh. However, that was part of the plan. In the next instant, the golem appeared and delivered a devastating blow, exploding everything around and defeating the monkey. Harkin decided he would hunt more of them to complete the mission. Meanwhile, the media was completely focused on the Thunder Hunters and Red Bulls guilds. In an interview, Sile stated that the victory against the Count had involved a bit of luck, but assured that they would continue working hard. Later, away from the cameras, she showed irritation. She knew they would not have won without the Red Bulls, and acknowledged that to achieve a complete victory, they would need the skills of Haho Mask. That was why she ordered them to call Haho Miechi immediately, because there was someone specific they needed to find. In the middle of so much combat against monkeys, Harkin's sword finally broke. He realized that was the limit of his equipment. It was time to get something better. The problem was that he had spent all his money. With no other option, he decided he would need to hunt gems to get resources. It is explained that monster gems are extremely rare drops. They are normally used to craft equipment, and depending on the monster defeated, they grant additional attributes. For example, the Green Goblin gem grants +1 point in dexterity, while the Werewolf gem adds 2 points of attack. Harkin knew that the Armored Monkey gem was specifically used in the creation of valuable equipment, so he ordered his skeleton army that from that moment on, they would hunt those monkeys until the very last one. However, after 9 hours of intense hunting, not a single gem had dropped, not even one. He only needed one. His frustration was reaching the limit. At that moment, an armored man appeared in front of him and stated that he must be Haho Mask. Harkin immediately noticed that the man was wearing extremely expensive fire lizard leather armor and carrying a warrior orc sword, which indicated he had to be at least level 70. He might even be involved with some strong group. The man introduced himself as Quixote and struck an exaggerated pose, as if he were a hero from a television series. He said he was there to challenge him to an official duel, since he had heard that Haho Mask had been getting famous on YouTube in recent days. If he defeated someone so talked about, he would gain popularity as well. Harkin thought thought he was just an attention-seeking player. He said he was busy and told him to leave, still irritated because no gem had dropped. That was when Kyoto offered 5,000 gold for the duel. Instantly, Harkin accepted. Kyoto saw himself as the hero of justice within the game. In other games, he had always been the center of attention, but in Warlord, no one cared about him. All the fame was going to Haho Mask. That bothered him deeply. When he finally found Harkon by chance, he decided that defeating him and posting the video would be the path to achieving the same fame. However, as soon as he issued the challenge, Kyoto removed all his armor. Harkin was confused by the action. Kyoto explained that he wanted a fair fight. Since Harkin was using a broken sword, he did not want to win just because of equipment. He wanted an honest fight, hand to hand. Harkin thought that was ridiculous. Even so, Kyoto advanced. While Harkin simply dodged, his opponent became increasingly dissatisfied, wanting a direct clash. Then Kyoto activated the Warrior Enhancement skill, which accelerates movement for a brief moment and launched Harkin far away with a powerful blow. Harkin immediately recognized the skill. He knew Kyoto's level was much higher. In a direct confrontation, he would have no chance, so he decided to fight his own way. Before the next attack, he threw mud into Kyoto's eyes, swept his legs, and began striking him while he was blinded. Kyoto protested, saying that was cowardly. Harkin replied that there is no cowardice when you are fighting for your life. Kyoto's problem was focusing too much on honor and formality. Next, Harkin used a graft based on the deadly movements of the armored monkey and prepared a strike that could be fatal. Kyoto realized that if he were hit, he would die. He tried to surrender, but Harkin caused an explosion by striking the tree he was leaning against, creating a terrifying scene. The intensity was so great that Kyoto momentarily forgot he was inside a game. Then Hirokon declared that he had won, and demanded the 5,000 gold that had been promised. To his surprise, Kyoto was not angry. On the contrary, he said it had been incredible. He admitted defeat, handed over the gold, and even offered his hero orc sword. Harkin recognized the value of the weapon, which cost at least 15,000 gold. He asked why he was receiving it. Kyoto replied that he should consider it a symbol of gratitude. He had spent too much time worrying about reputation and popularity, forgetting to truly become stronger. It was Harkon who made Kyoto realize all of that. Still standing there in nothing but his underwear, the guy declared that Harkon had the right to become his battle brother. Harkon even wondered if that was why he was handing over his own sword so easily. Deep down, he thought Kyoto was kind of an idiot, but he also seemed like a decent guy. Of course, he was not going to admit that out loud. Instead, he kicked Kyoto in the groin and ordered the skeletons to beat him up. Even while getting pummeled, Kyoto promised that he would come back strong enough to become Harkon's battle brother. He said that one day they would meet again. Harkon thought he was an idiot, but at least he was genuinely having fun with the game, and in the end, that was something good. Besides, he had now obtained a truly excellent sword. The Hero Orc Sword granted an additional 66 points of strength and stamina, and ignored 9% of a monster's defense. With that equipment, things were starting to change. He decided to continue his mission. Although he was still tempted to hunt more armored monkeys, the skeletons noticed he was getting a bit addicted to bets and rewards, and felt that could become a problem. After some time, the results appeared. Harkin had defeated 950 armored monkeys, 104 wolves, and 76 venomous lizards. When he returned to the cabin, Ma Wung praised his performance and said the investigation was progressing thanks to his effort, but he noticed the distracted look on Harkin's face. Harkin apologized and admitted he was only thinking about how to spend the money he had accumulated. Then Ma Wong showed him a map and explained that there was an especially dangerous mission near the mountain peak. A warrior bear had appeared in that region. These creatures were about 4 meters tall, wore full armor, and wielded a large scimitar. The objective was to discover where those bears were getting weapons and armor. That information could lead to the true origin of the corruption. Harkin summarized it directly by saying he needed to defeat the bears and bring the weapons back. Ma Wong asked if he intended to go alone, warning that it could cost him his life, but Harkin calmly replied that he already knew how to deal with those monsters. On the way to the mission zone, he decided to prepare better. He opened the player auction system and analyzed the best items he could buy with the money available. The best cost-benefit option was the Snake and Skeleton set. He purchased the full set, gaining 70 defense, 34 mana, and 34 strength, in addition to reducing mana consumption by 10%. In total, he spent 37,896 gold. Even so, he felt that was the true taste of well-spent money. He also acquired new skills to further strengthen his build. Even though he was still below the warrior bear's level, the difference was no longer absurd. The skeletons, however, started complaining. They wanted to know what they would gain from all of that. Harkin assured them he would buy upgrades for them as well, but the system warned that he was low on money. The skeletons were outraged. He explained that it was not intentional, and promised that as soon as he had more gold, he would invest in them first. Then he ordered everyone to go hunting to raise more money. Luckily, a boar appeared along the way. After a long chase, the last boar was practically begging for mercy, while the skeletons were already crazy for the reward money. Hirkin told them to finish the job, but before they could kill the monster, someone else did it first. A player approached and asked who had given them permission to hunt in that area. According to him, that region belonged to the Apollo Guild. Hirkin thought it was just another group of loser idiots trying to act tough in front of him. The three of them even had the nerve to introduce themselves before dying at his hands, as if that would change anything. For him, there were always idiots like that scattered throughout the game. He decided he would not waste any more time there with the skeletons, and needed to focus on what really mattered. Of the three, the only one who still had hair threatened him, saying he would regret messing with the Apollo Guild. Meanwhile, the guild leader, who was calmly petting a tiger, received the news that his subordinates had been attacked even after mentioning his name. Without changing his expression, he tossed a gold bar at the feet of one of his men and ordered them to bring that player to him alive. He wanted to make Hireken pay for underestimating the weight of his name. Meanwhile, Hireken finally arrived at the place where the warrior bear spawned. That was where everything was going to happen, but the little skeletons were striking strange poses, as if they were on a runway. He did not like that at all, and immediately smacked each one on the head, telling everyone to focus. Today they were going to hunt a level 70 warrior bear, a monster with 3 different phases. This was not just any fight, so they needed to be prepared. If they managed to defeat it, they would surpass the top 30 guilds in the main quest progression. This time, with no mistakes and with full caution, they would put into practice everything they had trained. As if summoned by fate itself, the bear appeared. Hireken immediately activated his slot on and decided that this part of the main quest he would face alone. At the same time, Heichi from the Thunder Hunters Guild complained to himself for being assigned the task of hunting a noob. Suddenly, he was attacked by the Wild Boar King, but defeated the creature so easily it looked like a joke. He was simply one of the 5 strongest mages in the game, and just wanted the Haho mask to show up so he could finish that annoying mission. Back in the battle, Hireken remembered his past life when he had tried to defeat that same bear with his former guild. They failed 6 times before winning, and even then it was a painful victory. Now he could not afford to make mistakes. If he failed, he would lose leadership in the main quest. To deal real damage, he needed to strike the parts of the bear that were not covered by armor. He had prepared a specific skill for that, and warned his skeletons that when he gave the signal, they were to follow the training exactly. The new passive skill muscle modification came into action. Hirken's jump was so fast and so strong that he simply went straight past the bear. Not even the monster itself understood what had happened, and in the middle of the confusion, it ended up destroying the entire skeleton army. Hirken realized that the skill enhanced his movements far more than he had imagined. He tried to use the acceleration to hit the bear's neck, but ended up crashing directly into the creature's body. The fur was too soft, but that did not help at all in the fight. He still did not fully control the skill. Even so, he managed to tear off part of the monster's armor. Without full control of his own body, he could not land a truly decisive blow. He had to retreat, dodge the bear's heavy attacks, and use the bone bomb. The explosion was strong, but for a boss of that level, it was almost nothing. The bear came out only slightly scorched. Realizing that direct damage was not working, Hireken gave up on that approach, and summoned his skeleton army again. He decided to fight like a true necromancer. The skeletons did not look very confident, but he promised that this time there would be no mistakes. He also summoned his golem to reinforce the front line. When the bear counterattacked and drove its blade into the golem's body, Hirken used body enhancement on it, making the weapon get stuck. It was the perfect opening. The 3 skeletons attacked at the same time, causing considerable damage. Hirken knew he still had one last big move saved, but it was not the right moment yet. Suddenly, the next pillar of fire cast by the skeleton mage hit not only the bear but also Hirken himself. He realized he needed to be more careful with his own allies. At that moment, the bear activated Warcry and recovered 50% of its HP. The second phase had begun. Hirken abandoned any complex strategic thinking and decided to rely on brute force and numbers. He summoned an absurd amount of bone bombs and began launching explosions in sequence. The battlefield turned into chaos, filled with detonations. He did not stop for a single second. A few moments later, the bear finally fell. Hirken received a massive amount of experience, 100,000 in gold, and completed Ma Wung's mission. He thought that in his past life that had been hell, but now he had won alone. He acknowledged that his skeletons had done a good job and decided to return to Ma Wung to start the next stage. Even so, the skeletons murmured that he had not fought in an honorable way. Hirken ignored them and moved forward. Meanwhile, in a tavern in the city of Bulkas, Haki was worried and discouraged. He could not find the Haho mask, even after searching the mountain for days. The video about the mask had gone viral, and now the mountain was full of players, making the search even harder. He knew he would have to return empty-handed and feared Cell's reaction. Deep down, he also felt it was unfair that they had sent him alone to search an entire mountain. Then he received a call from Sile herself. He admitted that he still had not completed the mission. To his surprise, Sile did not react harshly. She acknowledged that maybe she had pushed too hard by sending him alone on such an absurd task. The situation really was difficult, and she finally seemed to understand that. Heichi was moved when Sile said she understood the situation. He thought he would finally be able to return, but she explained that he would continue on the mission. The difference was that now he would have reinforcements. Before he could even ask anything, someone simply walked through the tavern wall as if it were paper. It was Hahui, the Princess of Thunder, completely irritated, saying that because of him she had also been dragged into that annoying mission. Heichi thought he hated that job more than anything. Later, Hireken noticed that Bulkas was much more crowded. That made sense, since many people had realized that the main quest continued in that region. He decided to go straight to Ma Wung to move forward as quickly as possible. On the way, he ran into 3 members of that other guild he had defeated before. He imagined another fight was about to start, but the 3 were running away in desperation. Even so, they ended up being intercepted in the middle of their escape. The one who did it was Hahui. Hirken recognized the 2 of them immediately. Hahui, the top 2 of the Thunder Hunters Guild, known as the Princess of Thunder, or even as the Mad Dog, was famous for for her extreme loyalty to the guild and her explosive personality. At her side was Hakushi, with the nickname Ballista, one of the most powerful mages in the game. In his past life, the two of them had been a huge problem for him, and now they were once again. Hahui asked if he was by any chance the Haho mask. Harkon knew exactly the reason for that approach. If they were looking for the mask, they probably wanted to recruit him, just like what had happened in his past life. He even thought about killing the two of them if he had the power, but at the moment it was impossible. With his current strength, he would not stand a chance, so he decided to pretend he knew nothing. Hahui did not believe him. She argued that it was impossible for someone to be in Bulkus and not know who the Haho mask was. The video had already surpassed 20 million views. That was far too suspicious. To her, it made perfect sense to suspect that he was the masked player himself. But Haichi interrupted the argument, saying that was not even the real problem. The problem was Hahui herself, who had destroyed the tavern and the inn, and had attacked several people along the way, just out of suspicion. Now someone would have to clean up that entire mess. As members of a famous guild, they could not simply go around causing destruction wherever they passed. He demanded that Hahui apologize. Harkon watched the scene and wondered if the two of them had always been this chaotic. Hahui ended up apologizing in a dry tone, asking if he was satisfied now. Heichi also apologized repeatedly, trying to make up for the damage. But in the very next moment, Hahui came back and landed a violent punch on Harkon's face. He did not dodge and was thrown far away. Heichi was outraged and asked if she had lost her mind. Hahui replied that she had expected him to dodge, like any strong player would. Harkon stood up as if it had been just a minor incident and commented that this was how a famous guild treated an innocent person. He put on his glasses and said he was going to film everything and report the guild. He began threatening to make a post on the community saying they were a cruel and irresponsible guild. The situation quickly became uncomfortable. To avoid a scandal, Heichi offered compensation in gold. After that, the two of them left. Harkon kept the money, but it deeply irritated him. Even so, he knew it was the best he could do at that moment. It was not yet time to truly get involved with the Thunder Hunters Guild. He needed to wait a little longer until he had enough power to deal with them. Meanwhile, on the way back, Heichi questioned why Hahui always caused trouble wherever she went. She was part of one of the biggest guilds in the game and needed to maintain its reputation. She could not act impulsively like that all the time. Hahui questioned Harkon's behavior and said that when someone suffers an attack, the normal instinct is to try to dodge. She noticed that at the moment of the punch, he looked to the side and did not even face her. To Hahui, that looked more like disappointment or contained anger than fear. That detail was extremely suspicious in her eyes. Hahui, already tired of conflict, asked her not to create any more problems and to just let it go. Meanwhile, Hirkan headed to meet Mao Wang carrying a piece of the warrior bear's armor as proof that he had completed the mission. He commented that something strange was happening around him, but he needed to focus on the reward. Mao Wang thanked him deeply and said that thanks to him the mountain would be safer. He asked if Hirkan was alright after the battle. Hirkan, however, showed urgency and concern. He wanted the reward delivered quickly before the large guilds started looking for him. Mao Wang opened a chest and told him to choose one of the items inside. They were dungeon maps of monsters that he himself had created while working in the Bulkas Mountains. Hirkan quickly realized that they were far more than simple maps. They were true treasure maps marking several hidden dungeons and granting access to exclusive rewards. However, Mao Wang explained that he could only take the map if he agreed to one more favor. There were reports of even more powerful monsters appearing in the region, especially in the Parung Forest, and he needed someone to investigate. Hirkan made a serious expression, but assured him there was no problem. Deep down, he knew that Parung Forest was a level 90 area. That meant he needed to level up again before even thinking about going there. He decided that the best path would be the Sura Canyon, where level 75 demons would grant faster experience. After defeating a warrior bear alone, that should not be impossible. When he arrived at the canyon, he found it strange that Slayer Shev was there. Meanwhile, Haichi contacted Sile again, complaining that he could not stand dealing with Hahui anymore. Sile thanked them for their work, but Haichi insisted that the problem was not the mission itself. The Red Bulls were dominating Sura Canyon, clearly trying to position themselves near the area where the main quest would advance. Sile agreed that it made sense to cancel the side mission and focus on the main one. She commented that the strongest players would soon start crossing paths, and that she was curious to see how long the Hahu mask would manage to run from her, because sooner or later she would catch him. Meanwhile, Harkon continued his farming routine. He defeated another level 75 demonic goat and reached level 62. The pace was excellent, and soon he could start thinking about Parung Forest. However, there were unwanted followers behind him. After the video where he defeated the warrior bear alone went viral again, he started being chased by obsessed players. That completely disrupted his concentration. He realized that fame had unpleasant consequences. He decided to change his plans and go immediately to Sura Canyon with his skeletons. There he ran into Slayer Shev, who recognized him as the kid from the beginner village. Shev commented that he had leveled up very quickly, going from the beginner village to Sura Canyon in just a few months. He also explained that the Red Bulls were dominating the area to get closer to the main quest. Shev also revealed that he wanted to find the Haho mask. He talked about the warrior bear video and said it was impressive. He asked if Harkon was not curious to meet him as well. Hearing that, Harkon realized he was being hunted from all sides. First Sil, now Chev, and soon it could be the top 30 guilds. At that pace, he would have no peace to farm. Then he remembered the map he had taken from Ma Wong. Using the coordinates, he managed to track a hidden dungeon dungeon beneath a stunning waterfall. He knew the risk would be high, but the reward could make up for it. When he dove, he realized he had only 20 seconds of breath. He found an underwater cave, and with time almost running out, discovered the passage to the dungeon. With only 1 second of air left, he managed to cross through. Upon entering, he received 2 titles, the first to Discover the Secret and Dungeon Explorer. Harkin concluded that he had made the right choice. If the outside world was full of people chasing him, the best option was to hide in places no one knew. He knew that because it was a hidden dungeon, he would have to face powerful enemies. However, the first monster that appeared was simply a slime. Silence filled the area. Even the skeletons just stared at the creature, unsure if it was a joke or the beginning of something much worse. Harkin ordered them to get rid of that slime quickly, because it looked weak. But out of nowhere, the creature began to emit fire from inside its own body, and Harkin immediately realized that it was a spirit-type monster. Spirit monsters are rare in Warlord, and the items they drop are usually used as materials for elemental equipment. Because of that, Harkin instantly understood that he could become rich from that creature, and ordered his skeletons to attack with everything they had. But the fire slime called for backup, summoning its ally, a level 70 salamander, a mid-rank spirit monster. With a single fireball, she wiped out everything in her path. The attack was insane, but Harkin knew he had no choice except to deal with that creature, which he had already planned to do anyway. Then he activated his new skill combo. On his main skeleton, he equipped the Helm of Insanity, the bone armor, and applied skeleton enhancement using the black orc skull he had bought at the auction. The combination of these abilities transformed the skeleton into a skeleton knight, a far more powerful form. Its speed was absurd, and in the blink of an eye, it literally tore the salamander to pieces. Later, a horde of salamanders appeared, but they were also destroyed by the skeleton knight, while it practically posed for the other skeletons. Harkin thought about how good it felt to farm automatically. Now that he had evolved his main skeleton, he could simply stand still while his servants farmed for him. The salamander essence was worth far more than he expected, more than enough for his next upgrade. He just needed to keep that pace until he evolved all his skeletons and continued advancing toward Parung Forest. About an hour later, he realized it would not be that simple. He ended up encountering an imminent dungeon, which was basically a dungeon inside another dungeon. There was no way to know that something like that existed in there, and now there was not much of a way back. If he failed, he would be unable to play for 2 days, which would be a massive setback. Even so, he had no other option. He entered the portal, trusting 100% in his own luck. After crossing through, he arrived at the throne room. The place looked like an ancient temple with statues of abandoned knights and several armors scattered around. However, all the armors had deep marks as if they had taken part in intense battles. Something was wrong. On the throne, there was a headless creature about to awaken. Harkin immediately ordered his skeletons to take defensive positions, but he was not fast enough. In an instant, all of their heads were cut off. Before him stood a level 80 enemy, the Spiritual Knight, a monster with extremely high-level combat artificial intelligence. Harkin had faced that enemy in his past life, and even with the entire Haho Mask Guild at his side, he had been completely annihilated. Back then, he had no chance at all. But now he could not allow history to repeat itself. He resummoned all his skeletons and decided to force a direct assault. The Spiritual Knight countered with absurd precision, and one of the skeletons failed to dodge. Harkin tried to take advantage of a small opening beside his skeleton knight, while another skeleton pierced the enemy with its blade, but it caused no significant damage. Moments later, the skeleton was burned to ashes by spiritual fire. The heart was not a vital point for that monster. He realized that ordinary skeletons and golems would not work there. Then he remembered something from his past life. When an old acquaintance asked how he had the courage to charge at a monster 10 times stronger, the answer had always been simple. If he did not defeat the enemy, there would be no reward, and he would never accept losing again to the Spiritual Knight. Even if he could not win with a critical strike, he would win with normal blows. However, with every exchange, the Spiritual Knight grew faster. At one moment, Harkin seemed to be pierced, but it was only his cloak that had been cut through. The opening created was enough for the Skeleton Knight to rip off the hand that held the enemy's sword. For him, there would be no rest and no reward unless he defeated that monster. Later in the Sura Canyon village, the chief commented that the place was far more crowded than he expected. The explanation was simple. With the guild taking care of the region, everything became better to live in. He also mentioned that he hoped the Haho mask would show up there. Yell thought it was an exaggeration since she did not understand the obsession over someone who apparently only hunted low-level monsters. But the chief knew that for them, those were weak monsters. For the Haho mask, they were not. That was exactly what made it impressive. He could defeat creatures far more powerful than himself alone. That was the true power of the Haho mask. After buffing his little buddies, Harkin made it clear that no one would get dinner if they did not defeat the Spiritual Knight. The creature that had previously lost an arm simply regenerated the limb using spiritual flames, which only made Harkin even more irritated. He took a deep breath and charged forward alongside his skeleton warrior. The knight attacked with his spiritual flame sword, shattering parts of the arena floor and forcing Harkin and the skeleton to climb over the debris debris just to get close. Even so, they managed to approach and land solid blows, but the knight's armor was extremely durable. The two had to keep pushing for quite a while. Harkin thought that if they kept stacking damage like that, they would eventually win before the enemy awakened even more power. That was exactly what happened. The knight released more flames, created a whirlwind of fire, and pressured Harkin with his blazing sword. His attack pattern changed completely. When an opening finally appeared for a counterattack, and Harkin called the skeleton closer, he ended up being struck in the chest. The blow was so powerful that it cracked part of his mask. He had focused too much on controlling his summons and forgotten about himself. He was almost split in half. The skeleton warrior stepped in front of the attack and was destroyed while protecting his master. Having taken too much damage, he was dismissed, but he still managed to give a thumbs up before disappearing. That was enough for Harkin to decide that the knight would die right there. He began throwing bone bombs to get closer through the smoke. The first attacks did not seem to have much effect, but he kept pressuring the spiritual knight, who still remained standing and even advanced. Despite appearing surprised, Harkin explained that spiritual-type monsters do not take much magic damage, and that he had known that from the beginning. Inside the bone bombs that dealt magic damage, he had mixed skeleton fragments. Then he used his ultimate summon. From the scattered fragments, he summoned complete skeletons that climbed up the spiritual knight's body and restrained him. With the enemy immobilized, Harkin seized the opening and decapitated him once and for all. He defeated the spiritual knight alone and received 455,000 gold, the title Knightly Spirit, a fragment of the spiritual knight's armor, and enough experience to level up. At that moment, Harkin remembered when he had tried to face that same knight in the past, alongside his friends. They lost, and he was blamed for the defeat. They said they would never be able to beat a knight of that level. Now in the present, he had won alone. One of the skeletons gave him another thumbs up. Harkin thought that this time was different, and admitted that his bony little guys had done an excellent job. The summons were practically moved by their master's recognition. He tried to leave the dungeon but realized he could not. He wondered if there was another boss, but that was not it. It was a reward room that appears randomly, with a very low chance. Harkin mentally thanked every god he could remember, completely excited to see the prize. However, he only received an old and worn book called Research Records of an Ancient Power. He knew it was connected to the main quest, but he had read that content so many times in his past life that he had everything memorized. He grew irritated for having obtained that seemingly useless item. That was when he noticed another much more eye-catching book. Back in Parung Forest, he assessed that he had leveled up enough, and that it was time to continue the main quest. He called his bony little guys, who were now fully armored, with the mage wearing a hood and cloak. They were excited, and Harkin could not blame them. Who would have imagined something like that would be inside a reward room? The new book granted the skill Armament, which allowed him to equip gear on his summons. That meant he could now strengthen his skeletons independently of his own level. Of course, that would cost a fortune in equipment, but for him it would be worth it. It was at that moment that three very suspicious men approached. They said that as expected of the Haho mask, they had already imagined finding him there. They introduced themselves as men who live for romance and die for romance. The romantic outlaws. They were muscular, with well-groomed hair and mustaches. Harkin thought that only weird people played that game, and simply turned his back. The leader, however, did not let it slide, and said it would not be that quick, claiming he had already expected that attitude from someone as talented as him. Harkin was clearly getting irritated while the three kept following him insistently. He told them to leave immediately, but the leader insisted that he had not yet received an answer, and asked him to join the romancers to protect romance. They also introduced themselves as the R2 family, and explained that they were training to reach level 100 in Parung Forest, but the monsters in the area were too strong for them. They could barely hunt anything, and were therefore looking for new members. No one wanted to join the group, which was no surprise to Harkin at all. The leader begged once more for the Haho mask to join them and protect romance. Not long after, Harkin had already beaten the three of them down. He made it clear that he was no protector of romance, and had no intention of getting involved with that nonsense. The three understood the message perfectly. Before leaving, Harkin warned that he would kill any of them if they followed him again. The leader commented that they had been rejected again, and that this had been their last hope. One of his companions asked if maybe it would be better to give up on Parung Forest altogether. Another, whose hair looked just like Yusuke Uromeshi's, asked the captain if he remembered the Toon family. The captain confirmed that he did, saying they were the group that once clung to a tree and climbed to the top out of fear. The young man then explained that the Toon family was now asking for help. Later, Harkin was already fighting a large orc in Parung Forest alone. That is to say, he and his skeletons. He ordered them all to attack at once. The perfectly synchronized strike from his bone army not only tore off the ogre's head, but also all of its limbs. Harkin noted that this was already the 55th one, and praised his summon's performance. Since the fight against the spiritual knight, every other monster felt far too easy. Their movements were predictable, which helped him level up quickly. The problem was that the mission he received from Ma Wung still required him to find monsters with armor and equipment. Up to that point, he had not found any in the forest and had made no progress on the main quest. He knew he could not waste time because the major guilds were also investing heavily in this part of the game. For a brief moment, he considered asking the R2 family for information, but he dismissed the idea immediately. He would rather die than work with them. Suddenly, a massive explosion echoed through the forest. Harkin wondered what kind of monster was causing that, and quickly realized it was probably exactly the kind he had been looking for. Meanwhile, the R2 family had gone to rescue the Toon family and were facing an army of armored monsters. The R2 captain realized that those enemies should not be there at that level, and that there was still a leader who seemed much stronger. He concluded that it had to be a monster intelligent enough to command an army. One of his companions raised a wall of fire to slow the enemy advance, while another warned that the Toon family was severely injured and would not last much longer. Someone questioned whether it would not be better to run while they still could, since the chance of victory was minimal. The captain knew that was true. The odds were nearly zero. Even so, the Toon family was asking for help. Despite having been rejected by them twice and treated like trash in the past, the captain of the R2 family decided to help. He explained that they knew very well what it felt like to be abandoned, and that for that very reason, they could not turn their backs now. He charged forward with his halberd and landed the first strike, but the damage was low. Immediately afterward, he suffered a counterattack and was knocked down almost instantly. He knew he was not strong enough, but he wanted at least to buy some time. Just before he was crushed by an armored orc, Frieren appeared and blocked the attack, striking the monster's foot and pushing the danger away. He made it clear that he was not there to help anyone, only to stop them from stealing his farm. He then summoned his skeletons and ordered the attack. The bone army began defeating the armored black ogres with ease. The captain of the R2 family could hardly believe what he was seeing. The coordination and power of those familiars were far beyond what an ordinary necromancer could achieve. He started wondering who the Haho mask truly was. After the armored ogres were annihilated, Frieren said he had already taken care of the small fry and pointed at the enemy commander, asking if he minded dying as well, now that his subordinates had fallen. The leader was a level 80 helm ogre, much larger than the others, and his presence left the R2 family uneasy. One of the members noticed that the creature's eyes were a mix of red and black, a sign of corruption tied to the game's main quest. Corrupted monsters were usually up to 3 times stronger than normal ones. It would be a difficult fight even for the Haho mask. After dodging the first devastating blow, Frieren admitted that this enemy was truly stronger than the others. The ogre radiated the power of corruption and charged like a beast. Despite the R2 family's warnings, Frieren remained confident. He activated the full power of his final form and executed a cut that shone like a star, slicing through the helm ogre's chest and killing the monster in a single strike. The R2 family was completely shocked. No one could believe what had just happened. With the defeat of the helm ogre, Frieren's mission finally progressed. He obtained a fragment of the ogre's helm and fulfilled the required conditions. Now all he had to do was return to Ma Wung. Before that, however, he wanted to settle the drop distribution. There were 21 ogres plus the boss, and that would be worth a fortune. By common rule, whoever initiates the attack usually divides the profits, but in that case he had done practically everything. He thought that maybe he should have waited for them all to die before stepping in, but when he saw the captain of the R2 family trying to save the others, his body had moved on instinct. The captain of the R2 family deeply thanked Mr. Haho Mask and acknowledged that everyone had survived because of him. Even so, he made it clear that they did not intend to simply let him walk away like that. Frieren thought he already knew how that would end. In his mind, people always change when money is involved, but this time it was not that. In fact, both the R2 family and the Toon family wanted an autograph and a photo with him. It was pure admiration. He even asked whether they did not want to divide the drops. The captain of the R2 family looked at the knight from the Toon family, who replied that the fair thing would be to split them, but the captain placed a hand on his shoulder and said he was sure he would not do something so dishonorable and lacking humility as taking items from the person who had saved everyone. The knight immediately changed his tone and agreed with a laugh, saying of course he would hand everything over. The captain declared that he had resolved the situation romantically. Frieren found himself wondering what kind of concept of romance those guys had. It was hard to understand the logic of the R2 family. Later, he kept thinking about them and remembered the invitation he had received. Deep down, he knew that at least they were having fun playing the game. He even wished he could do the same, wished he could join them and enjoy the game again, but he could not. He needed revenge. He needed to bring down the 30 largest guilds by himself. So he told the skeletons that they would pick up the pace and finish that mission quickly to move on to the next one. Meanwhile, the Thunder Queen easily defeated another large corrupted monster. Her squires, Hao Hui, the Thunder Princess, and Hachi, approached her. They brought 2 important pieces of information. The first was that 2 of the 30 major guilds had started a war. The Triple Wing Guild and the Great Smile Guild were in conflict. It all began when Berg, an officer of Great Smile, argued with a member of Triple Wing during a raid. Both guilds were investing heavy resources into the war, but Great Smile seemed to be losing. The Thunder Queen found it ridiculous. They were fighting at a crucial moment in the game, right in the middle of the main quest. She commented that she hoped at least one of the 2 guilds would fall after that war. Then she asked for the second piece of information. Haichi explained that the Haho Mask had defeated the Helm Ogre and was already far ahead in the main quest. Upon hearing that, she did not become irritated. On the contrary, she smiled. That made Haichi even more tense than if she had shown anger. She simply said that they should also accelerate and ordered them to obtain the next mission from Mao Wang. The Thunder Hunters needed to reach the second chapter of the main quest as soon as possible. At Bangsu Castle, Ahumbri commented that he missed his apprentice. Frieren did not understand why he had to return there. Ahumbri said he had heard that Frieren had handled Ma Wang's missions very well and decided to give him something special. It was a secret order ring, a unique item that increased all stats by 77, increased health and mana recovery by 20%, and also boosted class-related attributes by 22. Even with everything seeming perfect, perfect, Hirkin felt suspicious. When he went to speak with Ma Wong in his hunter's cabin, he stated that he would accept joining the secret order. Ma Wong warned him that he needed to think carefully, because members of the secret order had to be prepared for any situation. Hirkin replied that he would risk his own life for the greater good, but in truth, he only wanted the ring. Right after that, Ma Wong told him to return to Ahimbri, since he was the one who would deliver the official emblem. Hirkin already imagined it would not be free. Ahimbri teased him and asked him to beg properly. Hirkin slammed the table and questioned whether that always worked, but in the end he gave in and asked the way the professor wanted. Ahimbri enjoyed the situation, but finally handed over the ring. Now Hirkin was part of the secret order and would receive an even more dangerous mission. He would be sent to a war zone, one of the most dangerous places in the game. The battlefield was a continuous invasion of monsters against a castle for a limited time, far riskier than ordinary raids. In return, the rewards were proportional to the number of monsters slain, which meant real potential to earn a fortune. His mission was to survive and eliminate powerful monsters to prove he was worthy of the secret order. Ever since he reincarnated, he had waited for an opportunity like this, but he never managed to join because no guild wanted to take him along. Now he was excited, he just needed to prepare. Meanwhile, a female player followed the Haho mask from a distance, observing his movements and passing information about him to someone else. At the headquarters of the Apollo Guild, Apollo himself was punishing his members. He said it was ridiculous that they could not handle a rookie and still came back asking for forgiveness. One of the members tried to explain, saying that the Thunder Hunters had suddenly appeared and were far too powerful. On top of that, they were also trying to recruit the Haho mask. Apollo replied that the rookie must be thinking the 30 great guilds would value him, but he would turn that into his greatest weakness. Then he contacted Heavy Bean from the Great Smile Guild office. Heavy Bean wondered what that man wanted. Apollo went straight to the point and said he needed a favor. They had to teach the Haho mask a lesson. Heavy Bean asked if it was that rookie who had been standing out lately. Apollo confirmed and said he had dared to humiliate members of his guild. Heavy Bean felt like he was being treated like a fool again. He explained that Great Smile was already involved in a war and could not afford more trouble. Apollo made it clear that if that was the case, he would end his sponsorship of Great Smile. He reminded him that it was precisely thanks to that financial support that the guild had reached the top 30. If they could not do a small favor, there was no reason to keep sponsoring them. Heavy Bean immediately changed his tone and said that, thinking about it, the Haho mask really was a problem. He stated that they would teach him a lesson. After hanging up, he started cursing to himself. Refusing would be costly, but attacking the Haho mask could damage the guild's image. It seemed like everyone was trying to make his life even more complicated. At that moment, the spy entered the office. It was Cho Warung. She asked if she should simply eliminate the Haho mask. Heavy Bean considered that leaving it in her hands, since she was affiliated and not an official member, might be convenient. He asked if she could handle the job. Cho Warung replied that she owed her life to him, and that to repay that debt, she would kill the Haho mask without fail. Shortly after, it was announced that all participants had to pass through the gates immediately. Once gathered, a knight with a massive axe, Terba's Captain Bagel, informed them that the gates would be opened. He explained that outside lay a lawless region where monsters roamed freely. The gates would only open again after 144 hours. The reward would be based on the number of monsters defeated. In addition, everyone would receive a special mission involving a blue giant. Whoever killed that creature would gain a unique skill. Harkin was impressed. Unique skills were extremely rare, almost at the top of the game's hierarchy. He had only seen books of that level a few times in his past life. Offering something like that as a reward felt excessive. He noticed greed rising in everyone's eyes. Many thought they needed to eliminate the competition, and the most dangerous target there was the Haho mask. From afar, Harkin realized that the focus was not the blue giant, it was him. As soon as the gates opened, he shot forward like a rocket, leaving everyone behind. Some considered chasing him individually, but Warong appeared, suggesting they form a group to capture him. A knight questioned who she thought she was to give orders, but as soon as he pointed at her, his body was crushed in an instant. Warong asked if anyone else wished to oppose her. No one answered. She made it clear that she did not care about the skill book. Her objective was to kill the Haho mask. She promised to hand over the reward to whoever was the most obedient. Meanwhile, Harkan was already hidden, watching everyone organize themselves to hunt him down. He realized the situation would be a huge problem. Fighting monsters alone would already be enough work. Now he would have to deal with players too. That did not leave him with many options. He would have to put his plan into action. Wurong, on the other hand, felt lucky to have gathered so many people. She thought it was impossible for the Haho mask to face all of them at once. She began imagining that after killing him, she might become an official member of Great Smile and have subordinates of her own. She liked the idea of having men at her disposal, serving as furniture if necessary. She was so distracted by those fantasies that she failed to notice the horde of monsters approaching. At first, she thought they were just a few creatures, but a knight noticed there were far too many for an ordinary horde. Then she saw the Haho mask himself riding on top of a golem. He asked if they had really formed a group just to defeat him. He said they were in trouble now. He began ringing a bell, attracting even more monsters. At the same time, his skeletons formed something like a band, making noise and provoking the creatures toward the players. The horde started moving as a massive wave against them. The plan was working perfectly. The warriors were being massacred by the horde and began shouting for Warung's help. They said they could not even get close to the Haho mask because he was too far away, protected by a tide of monsters. In her mind, the plan had been completely ruined. They had prepared an ambush for a single man, but ended up being ambushed by him instead. Even so, she ordered everyone to hold on as long as they could. She said the horde would calm down soon, and that she would handle the problem herself. Then she began advancing, jumping from the heads of monsters until she approached Harkin, who remained calm atop his golem. He had to react when she came at him with an attack. Waring declared that she was challenging him to a duel. Harkin asked if she truly thought he would accept, since she was the leader of that improvised alliance. He asked whether he knew her from somewhere, because no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember her face. He found it strange that someone he had never seen would want to kill him like that. She knew she could not reveal her connection to Heavy Bean from Great Smile, so she said she was just another competitor, interested in the unique skill book. Harkin immediately realized it was a lie. Her expression showed that the book was the last thing she cared about. He clashed his sword against her daggers, and the confrontation began. She attacked with extremely fast strikes, and Harkin recognized that she was not weak. Even so, he managed to dodge and threw a bone bomb. To his surprise, she came out almost unscathed. He was impressed and asked which group she belonged to. She answered with a taunt and activated her slot on transformation. Harkin realized things had become serious. If he killed her there, he might never discover who was behind her. At the same time, she was not an opponent he could treat lightly, so he decided to take the fight seriously. Wang declared that he would finally see her true power, while the skeletons watched everything like spectators. She asked why the summons were not interfering. Hirokin replied that they were in the middle of a one-on-one duel, and that he did not need to summon anything to deal with her. That made Warong rethink the image she had of him. At first, she thought he was just a frivolous guy, but now she realized he also had a serious side. Even so, she believed that would be the cause of his defeat. She advanced at absurd speed. Harkon blocked the first strike, but he immediately felt the difference. Her speed increased even more, and one attack hit his face, drawing blood. Then she landed several dagger strikes across his body, leaving the Necromancer covered in blood. She even mocked him, saying he actually looked good like that, and was almost in the perfect position to serve as a chair. When she mentioned the name Heavy Bean and moved in for the final blow, one of the skeletons swept her legs. Horkin immediately caught the detail and asked if she had said Heavy Bean. He concluded that she came from the Big Smile. Taking advantage of the opening, he struck her head with his sword, knocking his opponent unconscious. Then he tied her to a post. He asked why Big Smile was after him. Warung replied that he would not get anything out of her. Then Hyrcan stated her full name, Cho Warung, affiliated with Big Smile and subordinate to Heavy Bean. She tried to deny it, but he said she was a terrible liar. When she asked how he knew, he thought it was simple. Before the regression, she had been one of Heavy Bean's most well-known subordinates. He insisted on knowing the reason for the pursuit, claiming he had not provoked anyone. She asked him to kill her and end the humiliation. He refused, saying it would be a waste to let someone like her die there. At that moment, he looked at his watch and commented that the blue giant had appeared. Harkin said he was leaving and that if she tried any trick, he would kill her. Her mind became confused. First he seemed like an idiot, then serious, then provocative again. She even began to wonder if he was unstable. She ended up emotionally shaken by the mixture of threat and strange consideration. She sent a message to Heavy Bean, informing him that she had failed to eliminate the Ha-Ho mask. He replied that it was fine and that she should rest. As soon as he ended the call, he became furious. He had trusted her, and now he was in trouble. At least Apollo did not know yet, but soon he received a call from Apollo, asking if he had not defeated the Ha-Ho mask yet. He commented that the news was spreading, and that it might look like Big Smile had been defeated by a single player. Heavy Bean mentally blamed Hirkin for all of it. At that same moment, Hirkin felt that annoying pain in his ear, as if someone was talking about him again. He thought that after getting the information he needed from Wurong, it was time to handle the next stage. He headed straight to face the blue giant, and this time he was not pleased at all with the situation. After a long time, Harkin was completely beaten up and tired as hell, but he had finally managed to kill the level 85 blue giant. He was outraged because the monster had the HP of a level 100 creature, and he had not expected the fight to last almost 30 minutes. Even exhausted, he thought he should thank Warung, because thanks to her information, those idiots ended up killing each other because of their own ridiculous plan to try to catch him. From what she had told him, Big Smile was after him, but this time, he did not know exactly why. Before the regression, because of the sudden popularity of the Ha-Ho Mask Guild, they became a target of the 30 great guilds, which united just to bring them down. At the center of everything was Solian Sile, better known as Sile, the Thunder Queen. Maybe she was plotting something against him again in this life, but it still felt like there was a missing piece in this puzzle. Even so, Harkin knew that thinking too much had never been his strength, because what he was really good at was beating people up. So he decided to keep everything under control, and whoever got in his way would die. He still had 138 hours left, and now he would start farming for real. After 138 hours, the people who had tried to interfere with him were completely wrecked, regretting ever provoking the Ha-Ho Mask. The experience had been terrible for them. The Ha-Ho Mask himself walked past that group while they argued among themselves, loaded with money and telling them not to fight like comrades, still provoking them by asking why they were making such ugly faces, as if it were not because they had been deceived and returned without a single cent. They were furious, but for Harkin it was just karma at work. Meanwhile, Wurung watched everything from afar and thought that next time she would catch him and make him her possession. At the same time, Bagel announced the main contributor to the mission, the Necromancer Harkin and called him to his office. Later, Bagel explained that his achievements had been impressive because he had defeated a large portion of the monsters and also beaten the blue giant. However, something strange had been happening recently, since blue-skinned monsters with a weird icy energy were appearing, just like the blue giant. He believed these creatures were coming from a distant ice mountain. Harkin barely paid attention because he already knew that the map of the Frozen Kingdom was located above that mountain. He only truly focused when Bagel started talking about the reward. Bagel commented that he was predictable, but before giving the reward, he needed to deliver a letter from his master, ordering him to go to the Urgal Mountains. The mission he received was called the beginning of the secret organization, and he needed to speak with a blacksmith named Wolf in the Urgal Mountains to hear about the next task. Harkin knew that place was filled with extremely powerful monsters, and it was no coincidence that he had first been sent to an area suitable for his level before receiving something like that. After that, Bagel handed over the promised reward, a unique skill book, and warned him to treat it carefully because he was the only one who had received it. Harkin practically kissed the book before even opening it, expecting an absurdly powerful ability. However, after the draw, the system asked if he wanted the skill playing with clay, and he did not understand anything. At the same time, Sile was not doing well either. Furious, she cut down almost the entire forest with a single powerful strike, enraged because some bastards had appeared out of nowhere and stolen the main mission her guild had been pursuing for so long. She wanted to know who those idiots were. Hashi explained that they were not part of the 30 great guilds, that they had left without being identified, and did not even seem to have very high levels. Sile ordered them to capture anyone who resembled those involved, and to put up wanted posters, as well as to ensure that no one approached the boss until it regenerated. She was determined to kill whoever dared to steal her prey. The knight responsible for the action commented that they had stolen the target from the Thunder Hunters Guild, and that the mission had been far too dangerous, almost costing him his life. Michelle explained that they had no choice, because the Thunder Hunters were moving much faster than expected. The knight asked if the next target would be a Hydra, but said they could not simply go around killing everyone. Michelle told him to calm down, warning that if their identities were revealed, it would be a huge problem. Singled of the Hands Guild confirmed that, saying their goal was to maintain the balance of the game and free it from darkness, and that this was the true purpose of the Hands Guild. The members were then introduced: the Lancer Knight Richard, Michael, who was already known as an informant, Ivaro with his strange monster-like head, and finally Momo, who questioned that Haho mask and asked whether because of Singled's failure, that man was clearing the main mission so quickly. Singled replied that their current focus was to stop the 30 great guilds, and that the boy would be dealt with later. Michelle said that was enough talk, and that it was time to move on to the next mission, so they all left together. Later, Richard was analyzing the new skill called Playing with Clay, also known as Clay Creation. Its proficiency was F, and the skill allowed the user to turn clay into monsters using drops from other creatures. The more he used the skill, the stronger the created creatures would become, but the materials were consumed in the process. Harkan quickly understood its potential. Basically, he could transform a golem into another type of monster, which meant creating a flying golem or even a giant golem to use in battle, something extremely interesting. He decided to test it using the tooth of the blue giant. After a great burst of energy-filled light, the result was a very small golem with an enormous head similar to the giant's. The system warned that since the skill rank was still low, the effect would be 50% less effective. Harkan was outraged with the game, finding that absurd. Later, already in the village of Urgal, he was still irritated, but he acknowledged that it was his fault for creating expectations that were too high. Nothing ever came easy for him. Everything was always complicated. Even so, he decided that he would gradually raise the skill rank, but for now he would focus on the main mission. He needed to find the blacksmith named Wolf, who was part of the secret order. Wolf was an extremely famous NPC, responsible for creating several epic items with impressive stats. Outside of the main mission, it was impossible to meet him, so Harkin had never had direct contact with him. Maybe now he would have the chance to obtain truly powerful weapons. However, when he arrived at the forge, he found the place dark, dirty, and empty. Suddenly, he was attacked by Wolf himself, thrown far away and losing a large amount of HP. He was confused, unable to understand how he could be attacked in an NPC area. Wolf asked if that was all he had, saying that rookies today were far too weak and that in his time they had been much stronger. Harkin wanted to know why he had been attacked, and Wolf explained that it was a test for rookies of the order. Even though he thought it was absurd to be attacked out of nowhere and call that a test, Harkin received the title First to Speak with Wolf. His class-related stats increased by 25 points, and since he was the first to survive the test, he also gained an additional 25% HP. He realized he had earned 2 titles at once, and thought it was wonderful. Wolf asked if he was angry, commenting that rookies today had no patience. Thinking about the benefits, Harkan said he was not, and began exaggerating in an attempt to please him, saying he would do anything, even clean or lick his boots if necessary. Wolf told him to get out immediately, calling him a weirdo, and threw a bag in his face. He ordered him to take it to the Byram Forest, and never show up like that again. Even being treated that way, Harkin did not care, because he knew Wolf could grant several valuable titles. He received the new mission called Wolf's Request, which required him to deliver the bag to those who resided in the Byram Forest. He knew very well that the ones who lived there were the elves. The problem was that elves were usually hostile toward humans, lived hidden and moved frequently. In his past life, special maps had been made to find them, but he doubted something like that that existed now. Since he had no other option, he decided to gather information. He went to the square in the city of Urgal and began announcing that he was buying information about the forest, offering up to 100,000 if necessary. Many recognized him as the Haho mask. Hirkin found it somewhat embarrassing, but it was the best solution. If he spread this publicly in the wrong way, he risked attracting the attention of the great guilds. Suddenly, an extremely powerful warrior appeared. With steps so heavy they made the ground tremble, he carried a mountain lion larger than anything in that square. The player asked if he was the Haho mask. Hirkin immediately recognized him as Pitbull Singh, one of the strongest players in the game, ranked among the top 100 in strength. The people around them were impressed and began speculating whether he wanted to fight the Haho mask. In his past life, Hirkin had already faced Pitbull Singh and managed to defeat him, but he knew he was an excellent fighter and could not guarantee victory now. The crowd began placing bets, some saying the Haho mask would win, others claiming that Pitbull Singh was known for cruelly defeating his opponents and that Hirkin had no chance. Irritated by the noise, Hirkin told everyone to shut up because he could hear every comment. At that moment, Pitbull Singh approached and said he could provide all the information about the Byram forest. Hirkin asked what the price would be, and Pitbull Singh replied that he wanted the right to confess his love. The entire square was in shock, questioning whether he was really confessing to the Haho mask. Later, already in the forest, Hirkin was still trying to understand what had happened. Pitbull Singh told him to calm down and control his breathing first. Hirkin complained that all of that was his fault, since the confession in the middle of the square had turned the entire city into chaos. They had to run to the forest to escape the crowd that began following them after the scene in the square. Once they were farther away, Hirkin made it clear that he did not like men and that if it really was a confession, he would have to reject it. Pitbull Singh became irritated and asked what he was talking about, calling him weird and saying he had never confessed to him. Then Pitbull Singh properly explained the situation. A few months earlier, while hunting in that forest as he always did, he had accidentally encountered an incredibly beautiful elf. To him, she seemed like the most beautiful being in that entire world, but without any warning, she ran away as if she were desperate, and he was never able to find her again. Since then, he had spent months waiting in the same place, gathering all kinds of information about elves from the local NPCs. He visited villages, spoke with residents who claimed to have seen elves in the region, but never found anything concrete. When he was almost giving up, he saw Hirkin looking for information about the forest and decided to ask for help. Hirkin finally understood why Pitbull Singh had been acting that way. He only thought it would have been much easier if the guy had explained everything from the start, instead of talking about confessing love in the middle of the square. Even so, he needed to finish his mission, and at that moment, only Pitbull Singh had any useful lead, so he asked him to take him to the place where the elf had first appeared. After a long walk, the two arrived near a waterfall. Pitbull Singh explained that according to the information he had gathered from the locals, elves usually appeared at Bekong Waterfall, and another frequent spot was beneath the great oak tree. Already at the edge of the area near the village, Hirkin said that was enough, and asked whether monsters also appeared there. Pitbull Singh confirmed that they did, especially large monsters. Hirkin thought that was perfect, because they could use their usual method, hunt monsters and force a reaction from the residents. The first monster to appear was a level 90 treebark serpent. Pitbull Singh stepped forward to attack, but Hirkin said he would handle it. Pitbull Singh asked if he was sure, because the level was high and it would not be easy. Hirkin answered confidently, asking if he had forgotten who he was, but the moment he rushed at the serpent, he took a violent headbutt and was thrown far away, rolling across the ground in a humiliating way. Pitbull Singh asked if he was alright, and Hirkin started complaining that it hurt too much, saying he was going to die like that. As the serpent advanced to devour him, an explosive shot struck the monster and pushed it back. All of that had been calculated by Hirkin, because the NPCs known as residents only interfered when someone's life was truly in danger. These residents were in fact elves. At that moment, 3 elven archers appeared and saved his life. Pitbull Singh asked if he had planned that from the beginning, and Hirkin said there had been a chance it would work. Taking advantage of the situation, Hirkin introduced himself respectfully, saying he was there by order of the blacksmith Wolf, and that he had an important mission, so he would like to be taken to their village. One of the elves immediately pressed an arrow against his face, saying that in other words they had been deceived. Another stated that humans could not be trusted because they were liars, disgusting and greedy. Hirkin was genuinely offended by that, and began thinking about what to do, because he did not want to use force against them. Before the situation could worsen, Pitbull Singh knelt before the elves and apologized for deceiving them, explaining that he needed to see her one more time. He spoke directly to the archer in the middle, saying they had already met in that forest, and that he had fallen in love at first sight, so he asked for a chance to get to know her better. Hirkin was incredulous at his attitude, but the elf seemed moved by his words. The other elves whispered among themselves about whether Celine had really enchanted a human, and they ended up taking Pitbull Singh with them, leaving Hirkin behind. Irritated, Hirkin complained that the game was garbage. He had managed to find the elves, so part of the mission was complete, but he still had not delivered Wolf's bag. Even so, shortly afterward he ended up following Pitbull Singh, observing everything from a distance, and began wondering whether that game was really an RPG or a dating simulation. He did not understand why none of the elves had shown the slightest interest in him. Pitbull Singh commented excitedly that he felt like he was going to die of happiness. Hirkin replied that they had almost died because of them, and that he could not go around with that love-struck face just because his confession had been accepted. He also warned that beauty meant nothing, because someone could be beautiful and completely crazy, and he had already met many women like that. Pitbull Singh explained that he did not like her just because she was beautiful. For him, elves were symbols of fantasy. Since he was very young, he had played all kinds of games, mainly fantasy ones, and read novels, comics, and books of the genre. Elves, especially dark elves, had always represented that ideal of a fantastic world. To adventure in such a world alongside companions had always been his dream. Harkin found it strange that he was telling his whole life story at that moment, and asked what that had to do with the elf. Then Pitbull Singh asked if Harkin did not feel the same, if he did not play that game because he enjoyed it. Harkin answered that he did not have that kind of dream. He only wanted to become the most powerful in the game and crush anyone who underestimated him, because he imagined the look on their faces when they were defeated, and that was what he truly desired. Pitbull Singh asked whether by acting that way, he would not end up becoming the same as those who had crushed him in the past. Harkin replied that he did not care, because in the end the strong devour the weak, and for him that was how the world worked. Pitbull Singh then asked whether for Harkin it was really natural for the weak to be eliminated. Before he could even finish the sentence, Harkin lunged at him and beat him down. He demanded to know what Pitbull Singh knew about his life, talking about dreams, happiness, and that kind of thing, saying none of that reached people like him. He had always been the type to push himself until he was completely broken just to survive. He asked if Pitbull Singh knew what it was like to be betrayed, to be stepped on like an insect, to be crushed while no one cared. He told him to stop that kind of talk right there. At that moment, Hirakan revealed his own face to Pitbull Singh, showing who he truly was behind the mask. Before the fight could continue, the elves told them to stop, because they had already reached the village of Bahrain. Selene introduced the place, pointing out the ancient tree at the center of the village. Hirakan told them to go ahead, and that he would follow shortly. Later, Selene asked Pitbull Singh if he had argued with his companion, but he remained silent. Later on, Harkin went to meet the Elder of the Elves, who had come under orders from Lord Wolf. He realized he had lost control earlier, but decided to set that aside and focus on the main mission. Elder Dragon appeared, and confirmed that it must be an order from the secret order. Harkin confirmed, and immediately handed over the bag. When Drag removed the item inside, it turned out to be an epic tiara, capable of removing all negative statuses and debuffs. The Tiara of Purification. Harkin instantly understood why Wolf had not allowed him to open the bag. He immediately began connecting the dots, imagining that the next stage would be to purify corrupted elves, uncover who was behind everything, and unlock the second main mission, with the tiara itself as the reward. However, Drag said he could leave, because at the moment he was too weak for that kind of task. Harkin realized he had hit a level restriction, just like in his past life, when he had also been forced to abandon the mission, but this time would be different. He promised he would return after training. He then went back to the forest and began hunting monsters non-stop. He knew the great guilds, especially the Thunder Hunters, were advancing quickly in the main mission, and he could not waste time. The situation was becoming more and more complicated, but he decided he would only stop when he reached level 100. As he fought in an almost insane manner, Pitbull Singh's question kept echoing in his mind about becoming like those who had crushed him in the past. That only made him even angrier, and he killed even more monsters. There came a point when he was so exhausted that he dropped his sword and began taking hits directly from the creatures. At that moment, Pitbull Singh was alone with Selene, explaining what had happened with Hirkan. He admitted that maybe he had said too much. Selene asked why he did not apologize, since in the end they had become companions. When a monster was about to finish Harkin off, Pitbull Singh appeared and saved him, saying he had come to apologize to his friend. Harkin reacted angrily, asking what he thought he was doing, showing up out of nowhere as if they could just talk. He immediately sent his skeletons against Pitbull Singh, and their swords nearly beheaded the poor guy. However, when he heard the sincere apology, Harkin ordered the army to stop. Pitbull Singh said he had interfered in something that was not his business, and apologized again. Harkin replied that if he was truly sorry, then he should help with the hunt. Pitbull Singh asked if he was forgiven, and Harkin threatened that if he said one more word like that, he would get kicked. Even so, Pitbull Singh smiled. The argument was interrupted by more monsters attacking, and the two began fighting side by side. They defeated countless creatures and farmed levels non-stop. After an intense sequence of battles, Harkin finally reached level 100. Pitbull Singh admitted that the training plan had been very solid. Harkin revealed that he had spent 3 days sleeping less than 3 hours per night to achieve that. With the goal accomplished, Pitbull Singh said he needed to go. Harkin thought that now he could take on the level 100 mission, and acknowledged that he would not have gotten that far without his help. He even tried to say something more directly, but became awkward. Pitbull Singh told him not to be embarrassed because that would make things too strange, and simply logged out of the game. Harkin was extremely irritated. Because he had been about to offer the main mission to him as a form of compensation, but now everything had gone wrong. Later, Harkin returned to speak with Elder Dra, who immediately noticed that he was much stronger than before, and said that he could now trust him a little more. Dra then handed over the Tiara of Purification and asked if he was listening carefully. However, Harkin was still irritated, and muttered that he would kill that bastard when he saw him again. Even so, he received the Tiara along with the mission of the corrupted elf. The moment he put on the Tiara of Purification, its effect activated, cleansing any negative status, and he even felt lighter. Dragon said he would leave that mission in his hands. Hyrcan thought that things were finally moving forward and asked where he should go next. Drag replied that he did not know the exact location of the corrupted elf, because if he did, he would have already guided him straight there. That irritated Hyrcan again. The map was gigantic, and he needed to find an elf that spawned randomly. He thought he had solved one problem by reaching level 100, but new obstacles kept appearing out of nowhere. Exchanging information publicly was not a good idea, because if they discovered he was on the main quest, the major guilds would swarm him like a horde of zombies, so he began to think calmly. The corrupted elf was known for creating armies of monsters with his elevated magical power, so he would probably be in the middle of an abnormal concentration of creatures. Instead of announcing that he was looking for the elf, he could offer money for information about places with many newly spawned monsters. That way people would bring data in exchange for gold, and he would find the target indirectly. He thought the plan was brilliant and started convincing himself that he was a true genius, until someone approached asking if he wanted information about monsters. Hyrcan had not even noticed that presence. It was the killer Chev, the same one who had earlier been at the Red Bull's base. Meanwhile, Elsa was approaching Chev, reminding him about the anonymous informant who had provided the location of the corrupted count. A new message had arrived saying that someone was buying information about newly spawned monsters. Chev immediately realized it was a distraction. The real target had to be something much bigger. Elsa commented that it was interesting, because they could monopolize the information. Chev replied that he would return soon and seize the opportunity with everything he had. Back in the present, Hyrcan asked what Chev was doing there. He had thrown out bait expecting to catch small fish, but in the end he had hooked a shark. He found it suspicious that Chev was so silent and thought about trying to stall, but Chev stepped closer and asked if he was thinking about running away. Hyrcan's skeletons had already placed their swords at Chev's neck, but he ordered them to stop. Chev admitted that it was smart because if he had attacked first, he would already be dead. Hyrcan found that humiliating, but he knew it was true. Then Chev demanded answers. He said that Hyrcan had absurd physical abilities for a beginner, possessed information that even major guilds did not have, and asked who he really was. Instead of answering, Hyrcan began shouting for help, saying he was just a defenseless beginner, and that the man was trying to kill him. Chev remained silent, analyzing. Hyrcan did not know if he felt pity or had become even more suspicious. After that, Chev commented that it must have been a misunderstanding, and that he was probably not the informant. Hyrcan quickly agreed. That was when Chev said he was willing to pay 5 billion, in addition to benefits and incentives for the right informant. It was a shame it was not him. Upon hearing that amount, Hyrcan almost drooled. 5 billion was far too much money. He even said that he had always dreamed of joining the Red Bulls, but quickly corrected himself, saying he was not someone who sold himself for money. Chev then got straight to the point and asked what he thought. Mask of Haho, with that deal on the table, if he would join the Red Bulls. Hyrcan was divided, but before he could answer properly, Chev warned that if he did not accept, he might very well become a rival. He drew his magma sword and pressed it against Hyrcan's neck. Even under threat, Hyrcan said he would not accept. He would not borrow anyone's strength. He would become the most powerful on his own, even if he died there. He told Chev to get ready, because he would be one of the first to fall in the future. But Chev simply ignored the speech. He sat down on the cliff and began talking about the Red Lake. The guild's information had confirmed a sudden and abnormal growth of monsters in that region. Hyrcan asked why he was talking like that, since they were rivals. Chev replied that he would never consider someone like him a rival, that he was just a little kid. He said the Red Bulls were the most powerful, and would never bow to anyone. He even commented that he admired the spirit of the Mask of Haho, because he fought alone, but that did not mean he could act like he was the greatest thing ever. After that humiliation, Hyrcan left irritated, but not before letting slip some information about Blood Mountain, and about the progress of the Red Tower in the main quest of the game. He implied that if they were advancing that fast, then they must already be at Salt Mountain. He tried to provoke him, calling Chev a clueless kid, and saying that now he had caught him. Chev just laughed at his face and said it was no wonder he was always called an idiot. Hyrcan left furious. Meanwhile, Chev reported that the recruitment had failed, because the greed of the golden eggs had been pressured too much, and he ended up giving up. Even so, he became even more curious about the Mask of Haho, and started wondering how far that guy could go. For him everything was fine, but Yell was very irritated and started calling him useless. He accepted the scolding without arguing. Later, at the Red Lake, Hyrcan was still irritated and grumbling to himself. The skeletons were playing with the red water as if it were the most fun thing in the world. He told them to focus, asking what was so interesting about a lake with red water. At that moment, he ended up remembering the time when he still played for fun, when his friends thought it was funny to throw red water in his face. As always, he had gotten irritated about that too. Thinking about it, he realized that place was actually familiar. He ordered the skeletons to stop playing and get into formation immediately. Suddenly, a group of players approached. Hyrcan thought it was an ambush and placed his skeletons on the front line. When he was about to order the attack, they all knelt down and began revering the Mask of Haho, asking for help. Then they explained the situation. There was a corrupted gray cockatrice in the area, a giant monster they had not been able to defeat. They said they were from the 2nd division of the Golden Brothers Guild, one of the 30 major guilds, but that they were practically disposable members. If they failed that hunt, they would be expelled. Hyrcan told them to summarize everything in 3 sentences. They explained that if they did not kill the monster, they would be expelled from the guild, that they needed help, and that they would pay for it. They offered 20,000 gold and would also leave all the rewards to him, since since they only needed to complete the mission for the guild. Harkin thought he would still have to deal with an elf after all that, so he accepted the deal under the condition that he would receive the 20,000 in advance. They agreed and thanked him a lot, although they seemed a little suspicious. In truth, that group was a former slave squad of the Apollo Guild, who worked in the caves mining crystals. They had been given a single chance to earn their freedom. The mission was to kill the Mask of Haho, something almost impossible. The Apollo Guild promised top-tier equipment and freedom if they succeeded, but if they failed, they would return to being whipped in the caves forever. That was why they were there, waiting for the right moment to attack, when his guard was down. At that moment, the huge level 120 corrupted cockatrice appeared. It was a massive and noisy creature. One of the group members, a bald man, said that at the signal they would attack. Harkin, however, already knew something was strange, and said he would break the creature's armor so they could strike afterward. Then he activated muscle modification, making his body more aerodynamic and advancing like a rocket. The group warned that the cockatrice was a long-range monster. The creature fired sharp feathers at high speed, but Hyreken dodged them all with ease. He commented that the monster seemed slower than he remembered. Then he struck the armor at the creature's neck and followed up with several rapid attacks against its shell. In a matter of seconds, he tore away all the protection surrounding the gray cockatrice. The group was shocked to see that he removed the armor so easily. Hyreken said that now he just had to rip off the helmet of that annoying beast. At that instant, the group attacked Harkin from behind. They combined different types of magic and struck him at the same time. When the dust settled, and only the enormous cockatrice was visible, they believed he had finally died. For them, that meant freedom. They would no longer be slaves. But Harkin said he should have known something was wrong. From the beginning, the situation had smelled bad. They claimed to be poor and abandoned, yet they were using high-quality equipment. On top of that, they made him, a necromancer, fight on the front line. However, he had prepared himself. He used skin stitching to gain 388 armor, activated false heart to increase 120 HP, and used boiling blood to improve his regeneration. In the end, he was practically intact. He made it clear that he did not care whether they were slaves or anything else, but now they were all going to die. Then Harkin summoned the final form of his skeleton army and asked if they still intended to counterattack. He commented that he did not even know if the cockatrice would be happy about that, because even the monster seemed to be against them. He asked if they had realized how screwed they were, and said they could just accept their own deaths. At that moment, the system warned that the corrupted elf had appeared nearby. In fact, she had been hiding and watching everything, and as soon as she understood the situation, she started running away. Harkin now had 3 minutes to capture her. He told the slaves to keep his skeletons and the cockatrice busy until he returned, and that if they tried to run, they would have a very painful death. Then he dashed after the elf. She was already within his sight. He thought it would only be a matter of time before he caught her, and that this would place him at top 1 in the main quest of the game. However, even when he got close enough, he could not grab her. He tried throwing a skeleton bomb, but she dodged. Time was running out. 6, 5, 4. On the next bomb, she dodged again, but Harkin used the explosion itself as propulsion, stepped on it at the right moment, gained momentum, and managed to grab her by the neck. As soon as she was captured, the elf spat blood. She had bitten her own tongue to kill herself. Harkin panicked and said she could not die like that. At the last instant, he placed the tiara on her head and initiated the purification process. He begged for it to work. In the next moment, she handed over one last thing before dying. Even with the elf dead, the mission was completed. Harkin acknowledged that the mission was complete, but he kept wondering what the point of all that had been. If in the end she would die anyway, when he saw the paper he received as a reward, he became extremely irritated with the game. Meanwhile, the slaves continued attacking the cockatrice, which was barely taking damage, and the skeletons were playing in the red lake as if they were in a swimming pool, tossing something like a beach volleyball. Then Hyreken returned riding his golem and crushed the chicken monster with ease. The slaves said they had been waiting for him, and asked for forgiveness. After being beaten badly, they begged for mercy. Hyreken asked if they were from the Apollo Guild. One of them confirmed that they were, and said they had no choice, since they were trying to get rid of debts. Hyrken realized that these guilds were hiring all kinds of people to try to kill him, and were even providing high-level equipment, items that were difficult to obtain. They were doing everything to eliminate him. The last time it had been an assassin from the Big Smile Guild. Maybe Apollo and Big Smile were in an alliance. If that were true, he would need to extract more information. He ordered them to stand up. They thought they had been forgiven, but that was not it. Hyrken commanded them to hand over everything they possessed. From that day on, each of them would owe him 1 million. They started to think he was even worse than Apollo. Meanwhile, at the Big Smile headquarters, General Heavy Bean was relaxing, doing a facial treatment with a cucumber mask. A messenger appeared, saying that the Red Bulls had declared war on them. Heavy Bean was shocked and wanted to know the reason. The messenger explained that it was a counterattack for having targeted the Mask of Haho. Heavy Bean began wondering whether the Mask of Haho had connections with the Red Bulls, and thought it must be a misunderstanding. He asked to arrange a diplomatic meeting with their leader. Soon after, another messenger arrived with even worse news. The high-level items that Heavy Bean had recently lent to Apollo were being auctioned. When he asked who the seller was, he received the answer that it was the Mask of Haho. Upon hearing that, Heavy Bean lost his patience and cursed the name of the Mask of Haho once again. Back in the Forest of the Elves, Harkin was not allowed to take the Tiara of Purification with him. Even so, he received a new mission. Now he needed to uncover the secret hidden in the letter delivered by the elf who had died. The riddle said it was was a place watched by eagles, where blue clouds covered the sky, and a village hid just below. Harkin had already been irritated before, and he became even more so after reading that. He did not know whether it was a real clue, or just a poorly written poem meant to make his life harder. Even so, he decided to look for someone more experienced in that kind of thing. He went to Pitbull, who was surrounded by several cute and beautiful elf women. The guy looked like he was living in paradise. Harkin arrived so irritated that he almost lunged at him. Meanwhile, the elves competed to feed Pitbull, and one of them even showed jealousy, asking if Asha was his favorite. He replied that all of them were his favorites. That only made Harkin even more irritated. He was risking his life on dangerous missions while that bastard was flirting with elves. Pitbull explained that he had ended up staying in the village for quite some time, earned their appreciation, and was just doing the best he could. When Harkin asked if that was some kind of mission, the elves immediately pointed their bows at him. Pitbull asked them to calm down and avoid violence. Even after that, Harkin told him to translate the riddle quickly. After reading it carefully, Pitbull said it probably referred to the Blue Mist Forest. He explained that a place watched by eagles suggested a high point, perhaps mountainous, and that the blue clouds were not real clouds, but the characteristic blue mist of that forest. He also commented that maybe Harkin should stop focusing only on combat and read a few books from time to time. The elves became excited, saying they loved intelligent men. That only made Harkin even more irritated. His skeletons approached trying to console him, almost as if they were saying it was fine to be single, but they ended up getting beaten for sticking their noses where they did not belong. The conversation was interrupted when Smogrian appeared, a huge worm that lived in the depths of the mist. Level 110. The creature lunged forward with its two mouths open and almost devoured Harkin. He dodged easily and cut the monster's neck right after, killing it quickly. He ended up covered in poison, but nothing he could not endure. He remembered the warning he had heard before. That place was difficult, even for hunters from the 30 major guilds, and served as an advanced farming area. Even so, at that moment he did not see anyone else nearby. Then a great being appeared and asked who he was associated with. Harkin replied that he had no ties to any guild. The being concluded that he must be an intruder. Suddenly, the entire scenery around him changed. The field disappeared and was replaced by a forest wrapped in a dark eclipse. Before him stood the corrupted companion of Anne, who declared that intruders must be eliminated. Harkin immediately realized he was corrupted and understood that this was part of the main quest. When Harkin crossed swords with the corrupted companion of Anne, he realized at once that he was far more powerful than he appeared. As soon as he sent his skeletons to attack, they were all destroyed with ease, as if they were nothing. Harkin was outraged to see his little skeletons being shattered like that. He advanced personally and delivered several cuts across Avan's body, but it was useless. Even when struck, the enemy regenerated completely. The system informed him that physical attacks did not work against that type of entity. Without wasting time, Harkin summoned his skeleton mage, but before it could properly cast a spell, the creature destroyed it as well. The problem was clear. Physical attacks did not work, and spells were being easily dodged. On top of that, Harkin had never faced that creature before, not even in his past life. That fight was like throwing himself off a cliff, without knowing if there was ground below. Even so, he decided to use everything he had. He threw the golem, but Avan dodged with precision. The skeleton army attacked again, using the Helm of Madness along with the Curse of Sloth and the Corrosive Spirit. Even so, Avan predicted every movement and destroyed them all again. One strike for each skeleton. He went back to trading blows with Harkin, who could barely counterattack. Realizing that his skeletons were not strong enough, he decided he would do it alone. He only needed an opening, a single clean hit, but Avan did not make it easy and kicked him away. After regaining distance, Harkin summoned the golem again and tried to immobilize the enemy. Even while being restrained, Avan reacted and drove his sword through Harkin's abdomen, but that was part of the plan. It was exactly what he wanted. With the blade piercing his body, Harkin managed to touch Avan's sword and curse his body, freezing his movements for an instant. It was enough for his army of skeleton mages to unleash a storm of flames upon the enemy. In the middle of the explosion, Harkin delivered his dramatic line. The mission was completed, and he received the title Destroyer of Corruption. After drinking a health potion, he lifted his eyes and saw that Avan was still alive, smoking but standing. He was confused. The mission had been completed. Instead of attacking again, Avan struck his own head, breaking part of the mask, and begged Harkin to kill him before the corruption took control again. He revealed that he was also a member of the Order, just like Harkin, but during a mission he had been consumed by the power of corruption and had become that mindless entity. He asked to be freed once and for all. Harkin stepped closer and spoke a few words of respect. He said Avan was the most powerful opponent he had ever faced, and that if he was that strong while corrupted, he must have been even stronger when human. He asked if defeating the one responsible for the corruption would solve everything. He even thought about the tiara of purification, but he did not have it at that moment. Avan said that Harkin seemed to be a good person, and that he was satisfied with that. Then he pulled Harkin's sword against his own chest, and asked him to leave the rest in his hands, calling him Junior of the Order. When he died, he dropped his sword and half of the mask. That completed another mission. Harkin could not hide how much he hated that game. Later, someone watched from afar all the destruction caused by Harkin. It was Syl, who questioned why he was working with the Red Bulls instead of accepting her offer, since she could offer him anything he wanted. Heichi believed his lady only recruited talented people, but he was beginning to realize that she had a specific fixation concentration on the mask of Haho, which gave him a bad feeling. He suggested that they leave, but before they could move, Singled of the Hands appeared out of nowhere. Neither Sil nor Heichi noticed where he had come from. Sil questioned why she should talk to someone she did not even know. Singled of the Hands stepped closer and asked if she did not want to get rid of the mask of Haho. Upon hearing that, Sil showed interest in the conversation. When Harkin brought back Aban's sword, Ma Wong was completely moved, saying that he had been a true friend and that he regretted not being able to reach him in time. At that moment, even Harkin did not make a joke, because even he felt the weight of the man's death and was shaken by it. Ma Wong thanked him, because at least now he knew what had really happened to his friend, and decided to leave the sword with Harkin. He thought it would feel uncomfortable to use a sword that was a reminder of someone who had died, but the system soon displayed the item specifications. Aban's sword, a member of the order, was a unique item that gave 77 strength, 66 stamina, 55 intelligence, and 44 mana, in addition to ignoring 15% of the defense of all monsters, and also having a rank C acceleration skill. When he saw that, Harkin was shocked by the absurd amount of stats the sword provided, thought there was no way to refuse since it had been left by Aban, and thanked him deeply for it. After leaving the cabin, he realized he had been incredibly lucky, and even thought about what he would do with the extra money he still had left. But at that moment, someone called out for the Haho mask, and before he realized it, he was completely surrounded by several players attacking at the same time. Harkin was confused, trying to understand who all those people were, and then Romani sent a message asking if he was still alive or if he had already gotten screwed, explaining that there was a bounty of 100 million gold on his head on the dark web. Harkin immediately understood why so many people were after him, because any player would do the same for that amount of money. Meanwhile, going back to the moment when Sil was confronted by Singled, she questioned why they wanted to get rid of the Haho mask and what the real reason was. Singled replied that he was a variable, comparing everything to a chess game, saying that he acted like a simple pawn but moved however he wanted and broke the rules, so the correct move would be to eliminate that pawn before he caused more problems. He explained that several guilds had already united and that once the so-called lightning hunters fully joined forces, they would be able to eliminate him without difficulty. Before he could finish, Sil knocked him to the ground, stepped on his stomach, and pressed her sword against his neck, making it clear that she did not work with thieves who stole what was hers, and asking whether he was on the side of those who had stolen the boss. Singled realized the negotiation had gone wrong, summoned his sword, counterattacked, and created an opening to escape. Hahui wanted to go after him, but Sil stopped him, saying it would be useless like last time, and ordered Hatch to contact all the guilds, warning that there were many competitors, but that the Haho mask belonged to her, and that anyone who touched him would be dead. While fleeing, Singled informed his superior that the negotiation had failed, and said he would accept any punishment, asking if he should eliminate the Haho mask. The answer was negative, because it was not wise to act so openly, since he knew his own strengths well, and had already used some hidden cards, so it would be better to wait, because time was on their side. He became curious to see what that pawn would do now. Meanwhile, Harkon ran in frustration, realizing that even if he defeated the players chasing him, others would keep appearing because of the bounty. Romani explained that with 100 million gold on his head, it was obvious he had turned into a winning lottery ticket, and asked who he had gotten involved with. Harkon knew he had crossed many wrong people, but thought the one who might have done it was Solian, although he found it strange, because with her personality, she would have come personally, instead of sending others. Romani was irritated by the situation and asked what he would do now, because at that rate he would not be able to finish the game, and if he gave up she might even lose her job. Even so, Harkin never considered giving up. He opened the auction screen and bought the wyvern skull, determined not to keep running without knowing who was behind everything. Dragging his hands across the ground, he summoned his golem to block the enemy's path. Knowing that golems were slow, he decided to invest all his status points into the skill, playing with clay, making the golem rank up. Then he used the wyvern skull on the golem and activated his ON slot. Everyone was shocked when the transformation ended, because he had spent all his money to mount a giant wyvern made of magical stone, completely changing the course of the chase. At that moment the story explains Romani better. She was always in contact with him, and was Jaehyun's exclusive video editor. That was her main role, but she also handled the management of the VTube with the mask, emails, and sponsors. She did not want to accumulate so many responsibilities, and said she was just a video editor. But whenever she saw the payment amount, she quickly changed her mind. Later, after managing to escape because the players were afraid of the wyvern, Hyrcan went to a private audience with Sile, the Queen of Thunder. When Hyrcan arrived riding his wyvern, Sile said that he had finally shown up, reminding him that she had already asked to meet him before, and that he had not even replied. But Hyrcan was completely irritated just by looking at her face, because Silehan had been the person who tormented him the most in his past life, the same one who made his group members betray him. He wanted to kill her right there, but he held himself back and asked if she was the one who had placed the bounty on his head. Sile replied that he had only gone there to ask that, and made it clear that it had not been her, telling him to stop being ridiculous. Harkon insisted, saying he did not see who else could have done it besides her, since she hated the fact that he had left the guild and taken everything for himself. He believed she had always enjoyed messing with people. Sile shot back that her answer did not even matter to him, because he would not believe her anyway, and that made Harkon remember that she had said something similar in his past life. She then explained that not long ago an unknown ranker had approached her, claiming to be behind all that chaos, and suggesting that the top 30 guilds guilds unite to exclude Harkin from the game. When he heard that, he once again remembered his past life. When she said she would exclude him from the game and questioned her decision now, Sol stated that she had refused the proposal and asked if he really thought she would do something like that, especially after someone had interfered with the main quest she was leading. According to her, Harkin was not the only valid target at that moment. He began to think that an unknown ranker bold enough to mess with the Thunder Hunters was probably the same strange group he had seen before. Sile asked if at least in that part he believed her, since he acted as if he doubted everything she said. Harkin answered that he believed her halfway, and she considered that good enough, concluding that at least he did not see her as the mastermind behind the incident. Even so, Sile called the Haho Mask once again and asked him to join her guild. That set Harkin off, because in his view, when someone refuses something, the other person needs to learn to accept it. Sile asked if he simply did not like her, saying she had always had the impression that many people hated her for no reason. Even so, she said she was speaking for his own good, and questioned whether he really thought he could endure alone with a bounty of 100 million gold on his head. According to her, he needed to trust her so she could officially protect him, and she assured him she would not force him into anything. Even then, Harkin turned around and said he would rather die than join her guild. Sil replied that it was not the time for him to be irritating, but he made it clear that he did not want to join any guild at all. He said he would become the strongest through his own ability, and that he had promised that to himself. That left Sil momentarily speechless, but she soon commented that it was childish, asking if he really believed he would become the strongest, like a child with protagonist syndrome. Harkin replied that he saw no problem with that, and Sil told him to do his best, because she would be one of the strongest competitors on his path. He thought that woman was completely insane, practically declaring war with a smile on her face. Without dragging it out further, he flew away on his wyvern. However, as he moved farther away, he began to think that being chased by Celoion had already been common, even before the regression. Something must have happened before he went back in time, but he decided he would find out later, after eliminating the person who was behind everything. Meanwhile, Romani contacted him asking what the hell he had done, because now there was an official poster stating that whoever killed the Haho Mask would receive 100 million gold inside the game. That would make practically everyone start hunting him. Harkin confirmed the situation and summed it up by saying he had gotten involved with a crazy woman. At the same time, in Missandra Castle, a boy was being kicked by players who thought they were strong, demanding that he hand over everything he had, and saying he would not be able to complete the quest anyway, so they would do it for him. The boy replied that they were just going to try to rob him again, and took another kick from a knight who said he needed to get beaten more, to learn how to think. At that moment, someone easily grabbed the knight's hand before the next blow. That person asked if he was the so-called mission guy known as Git. The boy replied that he was Git, but did not know if that was exactly the title they were using for him. Then Harkin, now wearing glasses, commented that this had not happened yet, and told him to come along. The knight asked who he thought he was, but a single strike from Harkin knocked down the three bullies without effort. Git was completely confused about what had just happened. Harkin asked if he was curious about who he was, but explained simply that he was just a good person passing by. Git thanked him immensely for the help, calling him sir. He had already completely given up, because if it were not for Harkin, he would have been robbed right there without being able to do anything. Harkin then changed the subject and asked if the mission they had almost stolen from him was the exploration of the Missandra Ruins dungeon, explaining that the objective was to clear the dungeon to nullify the area's blocking field. Git confirmed it, but was confused and wanted to know how he knew all that. Harkin simply told him to hand the mission over to him, and in Git's mind, that sounded like he was just another bastard trying to steal what was his. Even so, shortly after that, the two were already entering the Missandra Ruins dungeon together, forming a party of two. The system made it clear that if any member died or left the dungeon, the mission would be invalidated. Harkin was extremely irritated because besides having to deal with the dungeon, he was also carrying Git, who would not stop crying and complaining, saying he thought he would finally be able to clear the mission, but in the end it would be stolen again, and that he just wanted to go home. With no patience left, Harkin told him to shut up and asked how long he was going to keep whining like that. He questioned why, if he was always getting robbed, he did not just become stronger already. Git replied that he was useless and had already tried everything. He said he had always been weak, that in raids he only got in the way, that on the battlefield he died alone, and that because of that he had given up on everything and started living only off small NPC village quests. That was how he had found that hidden mission, and for the first time he felt that the game had recognized his effort. He asked if anyone thought it was fair for a mission like that to be stolen, but admitted he always ended up beaten by stronger guilds, and that no one understood how he felt. Tired of hearing all that, Harkin threw him to the ground and said that if he kept living like that, nothing would ever change. It did not matter what had happened until now, that dungeon would be cleared. Just because Git had lived as weak until then, did not mean he had to stay that way forever. After saying that, Harkin simply moved forward, leaving Git behind. Git stood still, thinking that he had acted as if he would kill him if he handed over the mission, and began to wonder if he had really gone away. He even thought about logging out of the game, but concluded he had no choice but to continue, because giving up now would be worse. Along the way, he ran into a giant monstrous bee, and almost had a heart attack from the scare. In panic, he ran straight toward Harkin, grabbing onto him while screaming that the monsters wanted to eat him. One of the creatures managed to grab Git, but Harkin cut off the enemy's head before it was too late. Even after being saved, Git ran around asking for help, and after almost an hour even Harkin was tired, asking if he was doing it on purpose. Git apologized, saying the monsters were too scary. Harkin just told him to stay still and not get in the way, because if he stepped into the fight during the boss battle, he himself would finish him off. Shortly after, they reached the boss room. Git realized where they were, and became even more nervous, because that dungeon was famous for its insane difficulty. The small spiders that respawned would explode when something touched them, and the boss was a giant spider with a shell as hard as metal. He asked if Harkin would be fine alone, but received as an answer that if he could not get out on his own, he would have to follow him. Without the courage for that, Git simply wished him good luck. Harkin advanced with absurd speed, dodging the webs with impressive precision. Git was shocked to see how he approached without touching any of them. The giant spider attacked with its metallic legs, but with a single strike, Harkin cut down the ones that came toward him, reducing the boss's options right at the start of the fight. He began exchanging rapid blows against the remaining legs, maintaining constant pressure, and to Git it seemed like he could actually win. But in the middle of the fight, Git ended up trapped in one of the webs. A small spider crawled up his body and exploded, causing massive damage and intense pain. He tried to break free, but he was surrounded, and the small spiders began exploding in chain reactions around him. Before he was eliminated, Harkin appeared and saved him, complaining that he was completely useless. With no time for explanations, Harkin told him to shut up and run to the dungeon entrance, making it clear that if the mission failed because of him, there would be no forgiveness. At that same instant, several spiders exploded around Harkin, hitting him as well. Meanwhile, Git ran back toward the entrance, thinking about how pathetic and weak he was, realizing that everything he did only caused trouble for others, and that even in the face of all that, the only thing he could do was run. Git stumbled halfway and fell, thinking he could not even run properly. In his mind there was no choice, no way out, and nothing he could do to change that. All his life he had heard that he was completely useless, that he should quit the game already, that he only got in the way. He had always been treated like trash. But then he remembered what Harkin had said, that just because he had lived as a weakling until now, did not mean he had to stay that way forever. And at that moment Git stopped running. Meanwhile, Harkin was trapped inside a giant cocoon of spiderweb. He broke free easily, irritated, complaining that if that kid had died, the mission would have been invalidated immediately. He had no choice. He decided he would summon his skeletons and end it quickly, but before doing that, he noticed something strange. Goat was coming back. He was holding a torch, drawing the attention of the smaller spiders. He said he would lure them all away so Harkin could kill the boss. Harkin replied that he just needed to get out of there before dying, but Git insisted. He said he had always been good at running away, and that if Harkin killed the boss while he distracted the smaller ones, they would be even. Harkin found it unexpected to see that courage, and commented that he had guts, but asked if he really thought doing it once made up for all the times he had been saved. Even so, it was better than listening to whining, so he charged at the giant spider while Git attracted the explosive little ones. Git's whole body was trembling. He was sweating cold, nervous, terrified. He had always thought of himself as weak, but for the first time that trembling felt different. It felt good, so he kept waving the torch, striking the small spiders and pushing them back as much as he could. In the end, together, they managed to clear the dungeon. Git collapsed on the ground exhausted, thinking that he had actually done it. It was almost embarrassing to say he had helped, because he had done very little, but this time, he had not been completely useless. But soon someone appeared behind him and pressed a knife against his neck. An assassin praised their achievement, saying he did not think it would be possible, but the two of them had really done it. It was not just him. An entire group of players appeared around them. Harkin asked what they were trying to do. The leader replied that if they had obtained something good, they should share. He ordered them to hand over the title that nullified the blocking field immediately. Harkin asked what would happen if he refused. The man answered that the kid would die right there. Even with the knife at his neck, Git said not to hand it over. He said they had worked too hard. He took a punch and fell to the ground. The thug asked if he did not understand the situation, that he just needed to obey. Even so, Git spat blood in his face and said that compared to those damn spiders, he was nothing. The assassin almost stabbed him. Then Harkin said it was fine. He would hand over the title, but only if the man defeated him in a duel. The man thought he was crazy and asked what he could possibly do alone. In the blink of an eye, all the allies of that group were dead. An army of skeletons appeared and eliminated every single one of them. Git had no idea where they had come from. The man with the scar on his face asked if he had been the Haho mask all along, the only solo player capable of summoning skeletons, the one they said had the power of an entire guild. Harkin walked slowly toward him. The man asked what a ranker like him was doing there. Harkin replied that it was none of his business, and told him to hand over everything he had or die. After a few screams, Harkin had already taken everyone's war watches. He commented that those NNGs always thought too highly of themselves. Leaving the dungeon, Git reflected that he had thought Harkin was just a strong player, but discovered he was a named player. He thanked him for being saved, and for managing to clear the dungeon, because alone he would never have been able to do it, neither physically nor mentally. He said that was all he had to say, and that he would leave, but Harkin told him to stay. He said the title was his, and that he could take it. Git replied that he did not deserve it. Harkin said he needed something to make up for things, to stop getting beaten so much, and keep playing. With teary eyes, Git said he would do his best. Harkin complained that he was starting to cry again. Git said it was just dust in his eye. The next morning, Harkin stretched and said it was much more comfortable to wear his own cloak. He thought about hiding because of the bounty, but concluded it was useless, At least he had gained something from that experience. A named player who collects rare quests. The mission man Git. Someone who would certainly be very useful in the future. He still did not know if Git would truly become the mission man, but that did not matter now. The blocking field had been dissipated, and it was finally time to enter. That was the real reason he had gone there. The beginning of the second chapter of the main quest, the Cursed Territory. Later, in the city square of Ricky, the Cursed Territory was already crowded. A player commented that the blockade had been taken down just a short while ago, yet there were already too many people on the new map. A woman told him to stop daydreaming and pay attention, because everyone there was a competitor, and pointed ahead. There stood the second squad of the Ares Guild, top 30, along with the first-class members of Triple Wing, also top 30. Right beside them was Hydra, another top 30 guild, and considered one of the most likely to complete the main quest. Everyone knew where the next stage began, which was why they were all gathered there. A rookie wondered if a nameless guild like theirs could survive in that chaos. At that moment, the Haho mask appeared, telling everyone to move aside. People were shocked, because they had already heard that he was the one who had taken down the blocking field, and that he always did everything alone. Hirkan noticed there were too many people there, and concluded they had probably heard he was the one who broke the blockade and rushed to the location. He thought they were a bunch of damned hyenas. Some people started spreading that the game admin must be helping him, because there was no other reason someone could achieve that alone. Hirkan thought they could talk all they wanted, but he had reached that point through his own skills and effort. It was pure envy. Then the rumors started. They asked if everyone had heard that he was Solion's pet. Hirkan was confused on the spot. A woman commented that the Queen of Thunder had said she would kill anyone who messed with him. Someone suggested that maybe they were dating. Another even said he thought Hirkan was involved with the leader of the Red Bulls. To the crowd, he had practically become the mascot of powerful leaders. That went too far. Hirkan grabbed the first person spreading the rumors and started beating him mercilessly, demanding to know who was whose pet, and making it clear he was no one's lover. Before things escalated further, an NPC with a cane appeared and said that was enough, warning them not to turn the place into a mess, because they were there for an important mission. It was Sarabo of the Secret Order. As soon as he appeared, the atmosphere changed. People commented that if he was there, then the next main quest would truly begin in that place. Hirkan realized the mission was about to start, and stopped beating the poor guy. Sarabo said it seemed things had calmed down and began to explain. That cursed territory was the place where a corrupt being had conducted forbidden experiments. Because of that, nearby monsters and even creatures from other areas had been affected by a curse. Before any progress could be made, they would need to deal with that corruption. Hirkan thought it was just like in his past life. To study the curse, they would normally request the capture of a cursed monster, the goat-headed chimera. It was a difficult enemy, but possible. He knew where it spawned and how to face it. But Sarabo announced something different. They would need to capture the creature called Evil Eye. Hirkan immediately found it strange. It was not the chimera. People began to comment that the Evil Eye was level 150 and possessed a passive curse ability, which made it practically impossible to defeat. Even so, Sarabo made it clear that not everyone needed to bring the creature back. Only 4 teams would receive the official opportunity. Anyone not in one of those groups simply was not part of the plan. The crowd became furious at the limitation. Sarabo replied that no one was obligated to participate, and wished everyone good luck. As soon as he finished, most of them ran off trying to defeat the creature before the others. In the middle of the rush, someone bumped into Hirkan, looked at his face, and nearly had a heart attack from the shock. That made Hirkan realize something much more serious. The future had changed. He began to wonder at what point everything had gone wrong, and whether events would continue to shift again and again. To focus, he slapped his own face. It had already happened, so there was no point in panicking. He needed to understand what to do first. For him, there were only 2 possibilities. Either the future had changed because of his regression, or the information he remembered from the past was wrong. He did not know which one was true. Meanwhile, Singlet was arriving at the cursed territory with the intention of starting the main quest immediately. However, before that, the plan was simple: to take down the Haho mask, and that rookie who had arrived in the new city was also there. He was now facing a huge monster. In fact, it was exactly the creature that was supposed to be captured in the old version of the quest, the goat-headed chimera itself. The mage in the group managed to use her lightning at maximum charge thanks to her allies' support, and finally the chimera was defeated. They could even complete the quest if that were still the required creature this time, but it was not. The mage told everyone to return to their positions and prepare for the next stage. The rookie asked if they could not simply go home because he was terrified of those chimeras. To him, the main quest was far too difficult, and he had no idea how a group like theirs could compete against a top 30 guild. The mage said that if he was going to keep whining, he should at least look ahead first. When he looked, he saw the Haho mask, alone defeating an entire army of goat-headed chimeras. It was 1 strike for each monster. Just like that, the boy was in shock, wondering if he had done all that by himself. The mage replied that there were people who cleared that quest alone, so he should stop crying. The boy insisted that he was the Haho mask, someone on a completely different level, and commented with envy that he wished he could play calmly like him. Meanwhile, Hirkan was on his own hunt for goat-headed chimeras. He had had little time and needed to be fast. Faster and faster. He picked up the pace, eliminating them one after another. But he could not stop thinking about what was wrong. The situation was different from what he remembered from his past life. Who was interfering? Who was after him? Without the correct information, would he be able to complete the main quest? He was so distracted that he ended up injuring himself during the fight. One of his skeletons brought a healing potion, but Hyrule refused. It was not the time to overthink. He needed to act. The other guilds had at least 5 people per group. To surpass them, he had to make up for it with speed. When the hunting time ended, and he returned, Sarebo was impressed by the results. He announced that someone had hunted many chimeras alone, and in large numbers. Hyrule thought it was him, but it was not. He had come in second place by a very small margin. Horkin was surprised. Who had finished ahead of him? Ares? Hydra? Another powerful guild? No. It was the same group of rookies. Before he could process it, someone approached and commented that it had been a while since they last saw each other. Hyrule recognized the voice immediately. It was that knight who previously had no identity, the unidentified ranker who had gone to the Thunder Queen to request the death of the Haho mask. It was Singled, the one identified ranker who had gone to the Thunder Queen to request the death of the Haho mask. He stopped in front of Hirkan and stated that he really was that person. In the same instant, Hirkan clashed his sword against his and demanded to know who he thought he was to stand in his way. Singled replied that he was not the one interrupting anything there, but the Haho mask himself. Suddenly, Singled kicked Harkin away, and as he approached, demanded a duel. If he won, Harkin would abandon the main quest. Harkin accepted immediately, because that was exactly what he wanted. They decided to go somewhere else. They headed to a ruined arena to settle it. On the way, Single thought that because of that kid, the Haho mask, he had endured a lot of humiliation. He would not let anyone speak to him like that again. He would end it right there. Once at the arena, Harkin began taking off his clothes. He explained that he was just preparing to fight. Singled found the gesture strange, and then Harkin revealed that he would use the Clockman style. This style consisted of fighting using only the War Watch, giving up armor and defense to focus entirely on offense. It was a technique that did not depend on equipment or high stats, but on pure talent and the determination to accept death if defeated. Singled said he had never heard of something so strange, but he also chose to accept the challenge and removed his equipment. He stated that he did not lack confidence. Thus both of them stood there with only their swords. Both of them charged at each other. It quickly became clear that Singlet was physically stronger. His strikes were heavy and precise. Even though he was lighter, Harkin had trouble landing hits on him. In one direct clash, Harkin was struck head-on and thrown against the ruins of the arena. Singled commented that scared dogs tend to bark too loudly, and questioned whether that was the level of talent of someone who talked so much. Lying among the rubble, Hirkan realized something important. It was not just Singlet's level or attributes that were high. He had sharp combat sense, knew how to read movements, and adjust his rhythm. It was not just strength, it was technique. The last time Harkin felt pressure like that was when he faced those two leaders. That heavy feeling in the air, that absurd difference in power. For the first time in that fight, he considered that maybe he really could not defeat Singled. Even so, he stood up, he activated the dark power of his blade, and charged again. Singled tried to block every strike, but still received several scratches across his body. They were not deep wounds, but they were enough to irritate him. He retaliated with brutal force, grabbed Hirkan, and slammed his head into the ground of the ruins, saying that this was getting boring, and that trying to face him with a simple debuff was ridiculous. He raised his great sword, ready to drive it into Harkan's chest and end the duel, but at the last second, Harkan reacted. He grabbed Singlet's leg and made it clear that it was not over yet. Then he activated a skeleton bomb. The explosion caused no real damage to Singlet. It was just a distraction. Smoke, noise, visual chaos. A desperate attempt. Singlet tried to see through the smoke because it was obvious that Harkan would try to attack at that moment. He sensed a presence and struck without hesitation, but it was only a small skeleton soldier, and that skeleton was not there to fight. It tore off part of Singlet's equipment and ran away. When the smoke began to fade, Singlet realized something was wrong. Harkan had disappeared. Before he could react, he received a call. The person on the other side asked what the hell he was doing. He replied that he was fighting the Haho mask. The response came immediately, saying that he had been tricked and that he should open the Haho mask's VTube channel right now. Meanwhile, on the Haho mask's channel, the broadcast was live. The stream showed everything. Singled taking off his own clothes, calling Harkan an idiot, acting tough while wearing nothing but underwear. And while he believed he was in an honorable duel, Harkan's skeletons were discreetly stealing his equipment. After that, Harkan simply ran away. When Singled realized the trap, he asked, since when all of that had been planned. Harkan replied that it had been since the beginning. He asked whether Singled really thought he was crazy enough to face a ranker head-on. Singled still mentioned the so-called Clockman style, the fair duel. Harkan admitted that he had made it up on the spot and asked if he had really believed it. Right after that, he ended the call. Furious, Singled swore he would kill that bastard. Even his scream ended up on the stream, and later in the video edited by Romani. Romani was laughing so hard she was crying. She commented that Singled was too stupid, and that almost no one would fall for something like that. When Harkan suddenly asked her to start a live stream, she was curious, but she had not imagined it would end like that. Harkan admitted that he was not sure it would work either. It was a duel offered by someone much stronger and more experienced. He was just lucky that Singled fell for an improvised lie. If not for that, he would probably be lying in the ruins right now. Romani asked what the next step would be. Harkan replied that he would continue continue the main quest, but first he needed to sell the equipment he had obtained. She commented that maybe no one would want to buy it, afraid of the wrath of that underwear guy. Hyken replied that he just needed to sell it to someone who was not afraid. For example, Shev, the Red Bull's killer. Meanwhile, the Red Bulls were finishing the raid of Salt Mountain. Shev secured another victory, showing off his blonde hair while celebrating. Yahello commented that they could finally leave that exhausting mountain. Shev also mentioned that his dealings with the Haho mask had come to an end. He said he needed a specific piece of equipment. Yahello questioned whether he really needed it, because he might end up getting into unnecessary trouble. Shev replied that he did not see a problem, since a little excitement made things more fun. Suddenly, someone almost struck him from behind. He managed to block at the last moment and commented that one should be careful what they wish for. The one standing there was the Thunder Queen. She attacked him without warning and demanded that he immediately hand over the equipment that the Haho mask had taken from Four Eyes. Expensive items with such a clear origin could be sold to her or to him, since she had not been contacted. She implied that Shev had already made a deal with the mask. Shev acknowledged that she had been clever to notice that, but asked what exactly the problem was. Sile told him to refuse the deal and step aside, stating that the Thunder Hunters would handle it. Shev replied that he was sorry, but the Haho mask had approached him first. It was not his fault that she had not been chosen. That visibly offended her. Shev added that if she was that irritated, she should speak directly to the mask instead of taking it out on him. She responded that she could not, because the mask did not like her, and any attempt would fail. She also had not liked the fact that he had helped with the bounty earlier. Hearing that, Shev started laughing non-stop at the situation. To Shev, the Thunder Queen was starting to look like a love-struck schoolgirl. He even mentally thanked her for the amusing scene, but made it clear that he could not hand over the equipment. He needed it as well. Even so, he said he could help her in another way. Shortly after, Shev sent a gift to the Haho mask. It was a skeleton armor set. He informed him that it had been sent by an anonymous sponsor, and added that there was also a question. He wanted to know what the mask's ideal type of woman was. Harkin found that strange, and asked why such a question had appeared out of nowhere. Chade replied that the sponsor was curious. Harkin thought for a moment, and admitted that he had never really reflected on that. Maybe someone who simply liked him would be enough. Chov said that answer might work better than expected, and ended the conversation. Harkin found everything a bit odd, but did not pay much attention to it. He had already sold all the stolen equipment, so now it was time to focus on the main quest. Meanwhile, Sarabo announced that 4 teams were finally assembled: the Nuppy family, the Haho mask, the Hydra task force, and the first corps of the Triple Wing. He explained the mission. They needed to eliminate the Evil Eye, a mutant of the Voodoo Chimera. Whoever defeated it would receive an item capable of destroying curses, the Protection Amulet. With it would be possible to move freely through the cursed territory. For Harkin, that was essential. With that item, he could investigate hidden areas and clues related to the main quest. It was practically a free pass. The problem was that capturing the Evil Eye was one thing, but defeating the other trained and raid specialized teams was another story. For him alone, it was almost impossible. When Sarabo gave the order to begin, everyone rushed forward quickly. The only ones left behind were Harkin and that group of rookies. He decided that he would use that method. One of the Nuppy family members commented that they had only managed to capture the Voodoo Chimera thanks to someone else's help, and that they were not sure they could handle the Evil Eye on their own. That was when Harkin approached and said it was still too early to give up. He asked if he could borrow a little of their time. Meanwhile, the commander of the Hydra task force was giving instructions to his subordinates. He told them not to repeat the mistakes of Chapter 1. No matter what happened, they would secure that mission, and if they encountered competitors, they were to show no mercy. A black-haired boy from the group hesitated and said he could not do it. The captain replied that it did not matter. Competitors had to be eliminated. At that moment, Hirokan appeared, provoking them and saying that kids these days had no courage at all. The captain recognized him as the Haho mask, but before he could react, he was beaten down. In truth, it was part of a trap. The boy stood up with Nuppy's help and asked how they had ended up stuck with a human like that. She replied that it had all started because of a fraudulent contract. Not long before, several players had died. At that moment, Hirokan was trying to form an alliance with them. He asked if they also wanted to complete the main quest. Alone, they did not have the strength to defeat the Evil Eye. He had that strength. The problem was the other competitors. If they helped him eliminate the competition, he would defeat the Evil Eye. Nuppy asked how they could trust him. Harkin replied by asking if they had any other option. After thinking for a while, they accepted. Nuppy stood up and warned him not to betray them. Harkin answered that she should say that to herself instead. She then asked how exactly they were supposed to eliminate the other competitors, since they were such a massive force. He told them not to worry about that. They would only be the bait. Right after that, Harkin beat up the entire group to make it look convincing. Later, everyone was entering the field of the cursed altar, where the Evil Eye was waiting. To Harkin, everything had happened faster than he expected. He asked the group if it had been easy for them. They were all exhausted. Nuppy called him a bastard, reminding him that he had charged at them out of nowhere, defeated several players, used the group as bait, and even thrown skull bombs while they were running away. Harkin replied that he saw no problem with it, and that in the end, it had been fun. Nuppy almost lunged at him, but an ally held her back, saying it was over now. There were no more competitors. All that remained was to wait for the Haho mask to defeat the Evil Eye. At that moment, the golem appeared and grabbed all of them, throwing the entire group into the Evil Eye's field. Nuppy shouted, asking what he was doing. They had done their part. Now it was was Hyrule turn to fulfill his promise. When Nuppy demanded an explanation, Harkin pointed at himself as if to say he had nothing to do with it. She nearly turned on him, but the evil eye charged forward and almost crushed everyone. That was when Harkin shouted to the left. The group immediately moved to the left, as if their bodies had reacted before they could even think. For a brief moment, it felt just like the training he had forced on them earlier. Nuppy understood instantly. She drew her weapons and ordered everyone to attack the monster. They were nervous, but she commanded them to follow her instructions and stay silent. She remembered the moment when Harkin had struck her on the head during training. He had said that at her level she should already be able to dodge that kind of attack. When she complained that he had not explained anything, he replied that she got hit because she panicked and ran around without direction. The correct approach was to watch the attack until the very end, and only then dodge. That was exactly what they were doing now. Following that principle, they began to pressure the evil eye. Nuppy led the team firmly, keeping the pace and organizing their movements. Before long, they managed to defeat the creature. Harkin approached, saying he saw what they did. All they had to do was try. Nuppy asked if he had planned that from the beginning. He replied that the fact they had made it that far already proved they were skilled. He admitted he was not even sure it would work. She almost seemed grateful for a second, but then she grabbed his collar and asked if he really thought he would get away with a pretty speech like that. Harkin answered that he had promised to defeat the evil eye, and he had not broken that promise. Before the argument could continue, the system announced that the scent of sacrificial blood was spreading. An altar rose from the ground, rooted in the spilled blood. Harkin looked ahead and said that was the true opponent, the real evil eye. The creature appeared. It looked like the same chimera with goat horns, but now it possessed a third eye and an absurd amount of magical power. Nuppy asked what exactly they had just defeated. Then, the third eye opened and activated 3 spells at the same time: Demonic Curse Outbreak, Sloth Curse Outbreak, and Spiritual Corrosion Outbreak. The combination generated a wave of fear that paralyzed the entire group. They needed to run, but none of them could move their bodies. At that moment, Harkin advanced alone, cutting down all the blood tentacles that lashed toward them. He commented that it was boring, and that such a curse was far too weak to work on him. The evil eye itself seemed to hesitate. Harkin said that now it was his turn, and activated Slot on with the skeleton armor. It was time to truly kill. He charged through the tentacles, cutting everything in his path. The boss began chanting spells one after another, trying to crush him with magical power, but Harkin said it would not be enough. That was when he realized he had been caught. A magic circle had been prepared on the ground, and his leg was petrified. The evil eye began charging a final skill to finish him, once and for all. Harkin thought quickly. If they were going to play at that level, he would respond at the same level. He infused his sword with energy and threw it like a piercing shot. The attack pierced through the boss sphere of power and drove into the creature chest. A massive explosion shook the altar. When the dust settled, the group could barely believe it. Harkin, the Haho mask, had defeated the master of the altar, the true evil eye. He commented that the skeleton armor was better than he had imagined. It was recreating about 70% of his ability before the regression. When equipping the full set, he gained an additional 132 points, distributed across all primary attributes, plus an extra bonus that raised his total stats by 150 points, along with a 10% reduction in skill cooldown time and 10% reduction in mana consumption. He felt like he was driving a sports car. Now he no longer feared the main quest. He did not even know who the anonymous sponsor was, but he felt deeply grateful. Suddenly, almost the entire group except Nuppy threw themselves on top of him, thanking him and saying they thought he was going to die. Harkin told everyone to get off him. The rookie was excited, saying he dodged everything, fired the sword, and blew up the boss like it was a movie. He asked how someone could fight like that. Harkin shouted for everyone to get off him immediately. Meanwhile, the leader of Singlet was watching the broadcast. He commented that the Haho mask had truly defeated the evil eye and asked Four Eyes whether he had not been instructed to prioritize interfering with the main quest, instead of focusing so much on the Haho mask. The leader made it clear that there was no reason to keep a tool that did not obey. Singlet asked for a chance. Any chance. The boss replied that he was going against orders again, as if he were trying to command him. Singlet lowered his head and confirmed that he would follow orders from then on. After that, he left the conference. The informant Michelle asked what they would do about the Haho mask. The leader answered that surveillance needed to be increased because he was progressing far too quickly. Even taking talent into account, his movements were frighteningly efficient, as if he already knew the scenarios of the main quests. Mikkel questioned whether that was not impossible. The leader explained that the main scenario of Warlord was a story created by the AI Mia using user data and real-time activity. In theory, no one could predict it. Even so, he ordered them to investigate and find out what kind of trick the mask was using. Meanwhile, Harkin excitedly entered a dungeon with his little skeletons. The system announced that he had obtained the title Catacomb Tourist and also the One Who Awakens. He was in the right place, the catacombs, ready to close the final chapter of the main quest. Shortly before that, Cerebo had delivered the reward, an anti-curse amulet that would allow him to cross cursed territory safely. He explained that thanks to the defeat of the evil eye, that had become possible. However, the danger still remained. That territory was where several experiments had been conducted by the Corrupt One, and traces of those experiments likely remained. Harkin's mission was to investigate the cursed land, especially Robin Castle, find evidence linked to the Corrupt One, and return with the information to gain the NPC trust. When Cerebo asked why he was not going through the main entrance, Harkin replied that he knew knew a better path. The real evidence was in the basement at the outskirts of the castle. In the catacombs, inside, his skeletons fought against undead creatures. He knew he was at the end of chapter 2 and intended to clear everything in record time. He wanted to finish before any other guild so that no one could even challenge his position. He watched his skeletons fighting with well-trained movements and said he was proud. They kept farming aura and even seemed to want more praise. Harkin stated that they had learned from him, so there was no way they could be any better than that, and ordered them to move forward, but he spoke too soon. 30 minutes later, they were lost. 1 hour later, they were still lost in the catacomb maze. 3 hours later, they were still walking in circles. Harkin began to wonder how long he had been there. At that rate, the other guilds would catch up to him. He thought he should have brought the group he had formed an alliance with. With a mage, he could have used detection magic. While complaining internally, he noticed that his skeletons, for some reason, had removed their own armor. He ordered them to put it back on, reminding them that it was expensive. He tried to calm himself because getting angry would not help. Even so, the system announced a new title, Disoriented Energy +2. That irritated him even more. After a long time, they finally reached a different room. There stood a great guardian, a massive skeleton in dark armor, carrying a shadow lantern. He began a speech saying he would make Harkin regret everything. Before he could finish, Harkin told him to shut up and knocked him down with a punch. The guardian complained that he had not finished speaking and received another slap to stay quiet. Sometime later, the skeleton became furious for being interrupted. He said that when he was alive, he had been a commander and he raised an army of undead. He asked what Harkin thought of that. Harkin showed no concern. He even acted dismissive, as if expecting something more impressive. He commented that he thought the guardian would use some powerful skill, but had only summoned a bunch of weak skeletons, something he could also do. Then he summoned an even larger army of skeletons and ordered them to trample the enemies. That was how he intended